Chapter 114. It wasn't a sword immortal. Mu Xianqing and the others were very excited at this moment. After all, the reason why Kuraki Academy was so afraid was because they thought the owner of the sword was a sword immortal. A sword immortal. They were naturally afraid, or rather afraid. But what if it wasn't a sword immortal? Then what was there to be afraid of? What was there to be afraid of? At this moment, everyone from Kuraki Academy was filled with fighting spirit. At this moment, the white-robed old man suddenly turned around. Have the people from Dark World arrived? Mu Xianqing was about to speak, but the white-robed old man and the black-robed old man suddenly looked up at the sky. There an old man was floating over on a bamboo. The old man was wearing a purplish-golden robe. Around the robe, there were some unknown ghostly figures that looked rather horrifying. Soon the old man landed in front of Mu Xianqing and the others. The old man looked at the white-robed old man and the black-robed old man and smiled. So it's the two elders of Kuraki Academy. The white-robed old man cupped his fists. You are. The old man shook his head and smiled. You two should know the rules of Dark World. Only the dead know our names. Dark World Assassins. There was an unwritten rule among the Dark World Assassins. That was only the dead could know their names. The white-robed old man glanced at the old man with the bamboo. Now? The old man with the bamboo smiled. Wait a moment, we're waiting for one more person. Who? The white-robed old man asked. The bamboo old man looked up at the sky and smiled. A swordsman. A swordsman. The white-robed old man squinted his eyes. Obviously, it wasn't an ordinary swordsman. At this moment, the black-robed old man suddenly said, If we kill her, how will we split it? The bamboo old man smiled. Dark World only wants her corpse. The golden core will belong to Kuraki Academy. If she has other treasures, we'll split them evenly. How about it? The white-robed old man fell silent. Corpse. The corpse of a sword emperor-level swordsman was very valuable. It should be said to be priceless. Especially to swordsmen, it was very valuable to research. Similarly, the golden dawn in one's body were also very precious. Although it was not as precious as the golden core of a sword immortal, it was still very precious. A moment later, the white-robed old man nodded. All right. The bamboo old man smiled and said, Then there is no disagreement. Once that swordsman arrived, he would head to Qingzhou. But those Dao protectors, the white-robed old man said indifferently, Everything has been arranged. My Kuraki Academy still has this bit of face. The long bamboo old man's lips curled up. That's great. Tizhou. Songlan Academy Back Mountain. Yixian sat cross-legged on the ground. Countless sword intents and sword rays gathered around him. Sword Eye. For the past few days he had been madly cultivating the Sword Eye. For him now, the most pressing matter at hand was to cultivate the Sword Eye. Unfortunately, it was too difficult. In order to gather the sword intents and sword rays into his eyes, he had to compress them to the limit. Moreover, he had to forcefully control the sword intents and sword rays. This was the most difficult part and also the reason why he had failed several times before. Fortunately, his body was strong enough to withstand the destruction of the sword intents and sword rays. It should be said that this Sword Eye, probably only a swordsman with a strong body like him could cultivate it. On the other side, in front of a mountain wall, Bai Zhe was madly slamming into the mountain wall. The bottom of the mountain wall had been smashed beyond recognition by him. After slamming for an unknown amount of time, he stopped. He lay straight on the ground, his whole body twitching. And on his upper body his muscles were bulging, his veins were wriggling like little snakes. At a glance, it was a terrifying sight. After resting for a moment, Bai Zhe took out a white jade bottle. Inside were body-tempering pills. One pill was worth around 300,000 gold coins. This bottle of pills was bought by Yixian for him, and there were a total of 20 pills. Looking at the white jade bottle in his hand, Bai Zhe had a complicated look in his eyes. Although Bandit Yi would usually go crazy when he was drunk, he really took good care of him. Mo Yunqi and Jianji. Aside from cultivating, the three of them would let Yixian handle everything else for them. This was also the reason why the three of them were so eager to become stronger, because they did not want Yixian to bear everything alone. If there was anything, they would face it together. And if they wanted to face it together, they could only become stronger and work hard to become stronger. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to face it, they might even be a burden. Bai Zhe took a deep breath and swallowed a body-tempering pill. After about a quarter of an hour he stood up and once again rammed into the mountain wall. Bang! The entire mountain wall shook violently. This went on for an unknown amount of time. Boom! Suddenly at one point Bai Zhe directly crashed into one of the mountain walls, and his whole body was thrown backward heavily. Bang! He directly smashed a huge pit in the ground. Inside the deep pit, Bai Zhe's body kept twitching as if he was having an epileptic fit. The veins on his body began to violently tremble, and not only that, the blood vessels under his skin also began to bulge. This went on for about an hour. Roar! Inside the deep pit, Bai Zhe suddenly roared angrily, and in the blink of an eye, the deep pit began to collapse layer by layer. After about 15 minutes, Bai Zhe suddenly jumped out of the deep pit. At this moment his body was actually a size larger than before. Most importantly, he had actually reached the Nether Passage realm. Other than that, there was a mysterious violent energy around his body, and at this moment his eyes did not look like a human's eyes at all, but more like a beast's eyes. After an unknown amount of time, Bai Zhe slowly clenched his fists. The power of the bloodline has finally been activated. Yes, go beat up Bandit Yi. Defeat him and I will be the big brother. After saying that, he directly ran towards the bamboo forest where Zhou Xian was. Very quickly he arrived at the bamboo forest where Zhou Xian was. He was about to rush over, but very quickly he stopped. At this moment Zhou Xian's body was emitting an extremely terrifying sword intent and sword light, especially in his eyes. The two balls of sword light mixed with sword intent were like two balls of lightning, incomparably terrifying. Other than that, the exquisite spirit sword floating beside Zhou Xian was also trembling violently, and the power it emitted directly minced the surrounding air. Seeing this scene, Bai Zhe hesitated for a long time. He thought for a moment, then said softly, Bandit Yi is actually quite a good person. You should go beat up Imogen Mao. After saying that, he turned around and left. He left without the slightest hesitation. Not long after, Bai Zhe arrived at the bottom of a cliff. He raised his head and looked up. Above the cliff, a figure like a spirit ape was constantly jumping between the mountain walls. It was Mo Yunqi. The mountain wall was very steep, but Mo Yunqi walked as if he was walking on flat ground. Moreover, his speed was extremely fast, like a gust of wind. Bai Zhe suddenly shouted, Imogen Mao, come down and fight one-on-one. On the mountain wall, Mo Yunqi paused slightly. In the next moment his figure flashed and directly appeared in front of Bai Zhe. Mo Yunqi sized up Bai Zhe. Just as he was about to speak, Bai Zhe went up and punched him. Bang! Caught off guard, Mo Yunqi was directly sent flying by this punch. However, he flashed a few times in the air and forcefully dissipated the power in Bai Zhe's fist. Purely using speed to dissipate power. After Mo Yunqi landed steadily on the ground, he looked at Bai Zhe and said angrily, Big guy, are you itching for a beating? At this moment, Bai Zhe suddenly rushed towards Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. F***ck, I will kill you. After saying that, his figure trembled and turned into a series of afterimages as he shot towards Bai Zhe. Very quickly, the two of them once again fought. Bai Zhe's power undoubtedly crushed Mo Yunqi's. However, Mo Yunqi's speed undoubtedly crushed Bai Zhe's too. Mo Yunqi was also very smart. He did not fight head-on with Bai Zhe. Instead he used guerrilla warfare. For a moment, the two of them were unable to determine the victor. On the other side in the bamboo forest, Zhou Xian was still sitting cross-legged on the ground. His eyes were tightly shut and his entire body was trembling non-stop. Just like that, after an unknown period of time he suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, two balls of sword radiance shot out like two bolts of lightning. In an instant the bamboo in front of Zhou Xian was instantly crushed into powder. As for Zhou Xian, he fell straight down. The moment he closed his eyes, two balls of sword radiance mixed with endless sword essence quietly condensed in his eyes. Sword Eye. After experiencing countless failures, he finally succeeded in cultivating this sword eye. It could be said that this sword eye was a cultivation method and also a sword skill. As for one sword soul fixation, he did not want to cultivate this move that targeted the soul at the moment. It was better not to bite off more than one could chew. Cultivating the sword eye to the extreme was the way to go. Sword skills were not about quantity but quality. After resting for an unknown period of time, Zhou Xian slowly sat up. He was about to cultivate again when a figure suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Xian. It was the 9th floor master. The ninth floor master had a panicked expression. Young friend, there's news from Azure Province's Drunken Immortal Inn. The experts from Kuraki Academy and the Dark World are already on their way to Azure Province. They should be experts from the Divine Central Continent. Xian stood up. They're already here? The ninth floor master said in a low voice. This time they should be here for your master. Young friend, does your master need any help? Help? Xian smiled bitterly. Until now, the mysterious woman had not replied to him at all. He did not know whether she needed help or not. At this moment, an invisible pressure suddenly enveloped the entire Mount Azure below. As this pressure appeared, the ninth floor master's expression changed drastically. They're here so quickly. Xian looked up into the sky. In the air, 4 people had appeared. One was a black-robed old man, one was a white-robed old man, one was a middle-aged man with a great sword on his back, and one was an old man standing on a long bamboo. All 4 of them were above the peak of the myriad arts realm. Xian's expression darkened as he asked inwardly, Sister Sword Immortal? Someone is coming to beat you up. What do you think of this? At this moment, within Xian's body at the top of the domain tower, one of the swords gently moved. In an instant, the entire domain tower shook as if there was an earthquake. Boom. In an instant, blood flowed from Xian's orifices. Chapter 115. The ninth floor master's expression changed drastically when he saw Xian bleeding from his 7 apertures. Young friend. Xian hurriedly sat down cross-legged and waved his hand lightly. I'm fine. The ninth floor master hesitated for a moment and asked, Young friend, what happened to you? Xian laughed bitterly. I encountered some problems in my cultivation. It's fine, it's fine. The ninth floor master had a rather strange expression. Cultivation? What cultivation? He actually caused himself to bleed from his 7 apertures. That's too terrifying. Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and immersed his consciousness into his body. Senior, did you do it? There was no response. Xian had a rather awkward expression when he received no response. The white-robed old man from Kuraki Academy looked at the ninth floor master. Immortal Indulgence Inn? The ninth floor master looked up at the old man. You are. The old man said indifferently, What? Does your Immortal Indulgence Inn intend to interfere until the end? They naturally did not underestimate the Immortal Indulgence Inn. After all, the Immortal Indulgence Inn's forces in the Central Divine Prefecture were extremely formidable. If the Immortal Indulgence Inn really wanted to interfere, then they would have to worry about it. The ninth floor master was instantly placed in a difficult position when he heard the old man's words. The Immortal Indulgence Inn actually wanted to stand on the side of Xian and his disciple because they were willing to pay a price to rope in a sword immortal and Xian. However, the precondition was that Xian's master spoke. If Xian didn't speak, then they wouldn't dare act rashly. Because the stakes were truly too high. The ninth floor master looked at Xian. Xian wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. Senior, you may leave for now. The Immortal Indulgence Inn was already very generous. The ninth floor master hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Xian said softly, If we really need your help, we will definitely not stand on ceremony with you. Now, senior, please retreat for the time being. This matter will have to be dealt with by us, master and disciple. The ninth floor master sighed softly. Young friend, if your master needs anything, then my Immortal Indulgence Inn will definitely do its best to help. With that, he turned around and disappeared. At this time, Mo Yunqi, Bai Zhe and Ji Anji arrived beside Xian. When they saw the 4 people in the sky, the expressions of Mo Yunqi and the other 2 immediately darkened. These 4 people had completely exceeded the scope of their understanding. In the air, the white-robed old man and the others sized up Xian's group of 4. In the end, the white-robed old man said softly, These 4 aren't bad. The black-robed elder beside him nodded. Very good. The bamboo old man also smiled as his gaze fell on Bai Zhe. I never thought that there would be a half-demon here and one that has awakened the power of his bloodline. Although he's only at the nether passage stage, I'm afraid that even divine combination stage experts can't do anything to him. The white-robed old man nodded. Not bad indeed. The toughness of this body is up to standard. Coupled with the power of his bloodline, he can be considered outstanding. Speaking of this, his gaze fell on Mo Yunqi again. Mo Yunqi hurriedly straightened his back. The white-robed old man frowned when he saw Mo Yunqi. Useless. Mo Yunqi almost went berserk. At this time the white-robed old man's gaze shifted back to Mo Yunqi. This time there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Special physique? This is the light physique. Light physique. In the air several people's gazes fell on Mo Yunqi. The four of them all had a hint of surprise in their eyes. In this world some people were special. This special referred to talent while some referred to physique. There were some special constitutions that could allow one to achieve twice the results with half the effort. And with Mo Yunqi's light physique, if he cultivated some Qigong cultivation techniques, it would be too heaven-defying. The bamboo old man suddenly smiled. Are you willing to join my dark world? If you are, I can spare your life today. Dark world. Obviously, in the bamboo old man's opinion, Mo Yunqi was very suitable to be an assassin. Indeed, if Mo Yunqi cultivated the ghostly cultivation techniques of the dark world, he would definitely be very heaven-defying. Seeing the bamboo old man openly recruiting Mo Yunqi, the white-robed old man and the black-robed old man were stunned. But very quickly they felt relieved. The two of them looked at each other, then looked at Bai Zhe. The white-robed old man said, "Are you willing to join my Kuraki Academy? If you are willing, I can spare your life today." Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi were stunned. Obviously, the two of them did not expect that they would be recruited. Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi looked at each other. Finally, Mo Yunqi raised his head and looked at the bamboo old man. He grinned. "Although I am very afraid of death and do not want to die, it is impossible for me to betray Songlan Academy. Not in this lifetime." Bai Zhe nodded. "I only recognized Songlan Academy." Songlan Academy. This place was their home. In the air the bamboo old man said indifferently, "Staying here is equivalent to throwing your lives away. With the talent of the two of you, you will definitely have a good future." Bai Zhe looked at Mo Yunqi. "Mo Yunqi, help me tell them that I will not leave Songlan Academy, and tell them to scram." Mo Yunqi glared at Bai Zhe. "Damn it. They're right there. Do you still want me to tell you?" Bai Zhe said coldly. "I do not want to talk to them." Mo Yunqi was speechless. In the air the white-robed old man shook his head. "Since you do not cherish this opportunity, then stay here and turn into dust." The bamboo old man nodded. "Don't force it. There are many geniuses out there." At this moment the black-robed old man suddenly looked at Xianxia. The bamboo old man, the white-robed old man, and the middle-aged man with a huge sword also looked at Xianxia. Xianxia was expressionless. He took out a bun and took 2 bites. After a while the white-robed old man shook his head. There is nothing special about him. However, he has comprehended the sword intent. Speaking of this, the few of them looked serious. He did not have any special talent but comprehended the sword intent. This seemed very ordinary, but it was not ordinary. Xianxia came here with the most ordinary talent. This meant that no matter in terms of temperament or hard work, he was definitely the best. This kind of person was often the most terrifying. The white-robed old man looked at Xianxia. "I think you will not leave Songlan Academy. It's good. It saves us from wasting our breath." Then he turned around to look at Zhou Xian, who was not far away. As the white-robed old man's gaze fell on Zhou Xian, everyone's gaze fell on Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian. Without a doubt he was the most dazzling person in Jiang country. He was even more dazzling than in Lanxiu. The white-robed old man and the others looked at Zhou Xian and did not speak. At this moment Zhou Xian was expressionless. He looked very calm, but he was actually panicking. Because the mysterious woman had not responded at all. Zhou Xian smiled bitterly in his heart. "Senior, these people are here for you. You can't ignore them." The mysterious woman still did not respond. Even though she did not respond, a piece of paper floated out from the second level. Zhou Xian's expression changed drastically when he saw the piece of paper, and he hurriedly withdrew his consciousness and left the pagoda. "I can't afford to offend her. I can't afford to offend her." Zhou Xian raised his head to look at the old man and the others. Meanwhile, the old man spoke flatly. "It's simply rare for someone at the peak of the Ascension realm to possess such a solid foundation. Not only have you comprehended sword intent, you've also comprehended battle intent. You cultivate both the sword and martial arts. Moreover, your physical body is so formidable. Rare indeed. With your strength, you'll at least be able to enter the top 10 of the martial rankings. If you attain the Nether Passage realm, you'll probably be able to enter the top 5. The black-robed old man nodded. It's truly rare in the borders of Jiang country. It's rare even in the entire Pine Prefecture. Your strength will probably surpass Tuoba Fu of Ning country in the future. When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at the bamboo old man. What do you think? The bamboo old man smiled indifferently. The more monstrous he is, the more he deserves death. The surroundings instantly fell silent. The white-robed old man and black-robed old man glanced at Zhou Xian and remained silent. Death. They naturally wouldn't allow a person like Zhou Xian to grow. In their opinion, if they couldn't become friends and instead became enemies, then they naturally had to eliminate Zhou Xian to avoid leaving any future troubles. Right at this moment, the man with the huge sword on his back suddenly gazed at Zhou Xian. What sword intent is that? Sword intent. Zhou Xian shook his head. Actually, he really didn't know what sword intent it was, and he was very curious about it as well. Once the mysterious woman emerged, he would definitely get to the bottom of it. The problem was, when would the mysterious woman emerge? He really couldn't defeat these 4 people before him. Otherwise, he would have fucking drawn his sword a long time ago. In midair, the white-robed old man glanced at the surroundings. In the end, his gaze descended onto Zhou Xian. Your master still hasn't shown himself? Zhou Xian didn't answer him, and he spoke in a low voice in his heart. Sword Celestial Sister. Stop sleeping, wake up quickly. There's a fight. There was still no response. Zhou Xian's face was filled with black lines. Wasn't this a trap for his disciple? In midair, the white-robed old man suddenly said, looks like we still have to exert some pressure on her. As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand pressed down towards Zhou Xian and the other 3. Boom. A monstrous pressure descended from the sky like dozens of mountains, instantly causing Zhou Xian and the other 3 to almost kneel down. However, the 4 of them forcefully endured it. However, almost instantly blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. At this moment, the 4 of them couldn't breathe and felt as if their bodies were about to collapse. Zhou Xian suddenly let out a furious roar, and a powerful battle intent surged out of his body. However, very quickly, this battle intent was forcefully suppressed back into his body by the pressure. Zhou Xian stomped his right foot and his battle intent soared into the sky again. This time, apart from battle intent, there was also sword intent. The 2 intents merged into one and forcefully resisted the white-robed old man's pressure. The white-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The combination of 2 intents. You're actually able to combine them like this. As he spoke, he pressed his right hand down. Crack. In an instant, the ground beneath Zhou Xian's group started to crack inch by inch. However, Zhou Xian's group of 4 forcefully resisted it, and none of them knelt down. The white-robed old man was about to attack again. However, Zhou Xian suddenly raised his head and roared furiously, I'll fucking kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot against the ground and shot into the sky. He couldn't defeat the white-robed old man. However, Zhou Xian intended to fight him. Even if he died, he intended to attack with this sword strike. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of the white-robed old man's mouth, and then he pressed his right hand down lightly. Bang! Zhou Xian was instantly pressed down to the ground, and he just descended to the ground when the ground beneath his feet instantly split open into a deep pit that was over 10 m deep. The white-robed old man was just about to attack when a voice suddenly resounded. All of you were looking for me? The white-robed old man and the others swiftly turned their heads, and they saw a woman in a plain dress standing on a leaf in a bamboo forest in the distance. She had one hand behind her back, and there was a black and 100 tails of silver coiled around her fingertips. The white-robed old man and the others instantly became vigilant when they saw the woman. Meanwhile, the woman pointed at Zhou Xian. Close your eyes. I'm going to clear this place. As soon as she finished speaking, she stretched out her left hand and opened her palm. Sword. The pagoda of purgatory within Zhou Xian's body suddenly shook violently, and then one of the 3 swords at the top of the pagoda shook violently. Chapter 116. Just as the sword at the top of the pagoda trembled violently, Zhou Xian's head seemed to have been struck by a heavy blow. His consciousness blurred, and at the same time, blood flowed out of his 7 apertures. It was a terrifying sight. Mo Yunqi and the other 2's expressions changed drastically when they saw this. They hurriedly supported Zhou Xian. Just then, the lady in the plain dress pressed her left hand down lightly. I'm not talking to you. Her voice faded away. The sword that was trembling in Yi Xian's body calmed down completely. However, before it calmed down, it let out a slight sword hum as if it was trying to express something. Above the bamboo forest, the lady in the plain dress opened her left hand. Sword come. As the plain-dressed woman's voice fell, swoosh swoosh swoosh, the entire bamboo forest suddenly trembled. Very quickly, under the gazes of the crowd, the bamboo leaves soared into the sky and gathered towards the woman in the plain dress. These leaves fell into the palm of the woman in the plain dress. Very quickly, a sword that was condensed from countless bamboo leaves appeared in the palm of the woman in the plain dress. Seeing this, the expressions of the old man in white and the others changed drastically. Especially the swordsman who carried a huge sword on his back. What technique is this? I've never seen or heard of such a technique. Below, Mo Yunqi and the others were dumbfounded. Back then they had seen the lady in the plain dress. When they saw the lady in the plain dress slaughtering everyone, they were already extremely shocked. However, they had never asked Yi Xian about the mysterious lady. Respect. Because they knew that when the time came, Yi Xian would definitely take the initiative to talk about it. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the lady in the plain dress. Actually, just like everyone else, he was extremely shocked. The mysterious lady. She was really mysterious. From the beginning to the end, she was a mystery. He didn't know where the lady in front of him came from. All he knew was that she was very strong. Very strong. And every time the mysterious lady came out, the guy on the second floor would be extremely quiet. In the air, the old man in white and the others stared at the lady in the plain dress. At this moment, their eyes were filled with fear and seriousness. Although the lady in the plain dress didn't attack, they actually felt an invisible pressure. Especially that move of the woman in a simple dress. It caused the four of them to be incomparably fearful. Above the bamboo forest, the woman in the plain dress pointed her bamboo sword at the white-robed old man and the other three. Come, let's attack together. Attack together. The surroundings were so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Down below, Mo Yun raised his right arm and lightly poked Yi Xian's arm. Bandit Yi, where did you find this master? Introduce me to one, I'll go find one as well. Yi Xian said sternly, you can't. Why? Mo Yunqi was puzzled. Am I not handsome enough? Ugh. At the side, Bai Zhe made a very exaggerated gesture of vomiting. Ji Anji had originally taken a bite of the steamed bun, but after hearing Mo Yunqi's words, she actually spat out the steamed bun. It was truly a bit nauseating. Yi Xian patted Mo Yunqi's shoulder lightly. I used to think that you were narcissistic, but I was wrong. You're not narcissistic, are you blind handsome? What do you have to do with this word? Mo Yunqi. At this moment, the middle-aged man with a sword on his back suddenly walked over to the left of the woman in the plain dress. The man stared fixedly at the woman. I know a little about the famous sword emperors and sword immortals of the central divine continent, but I don't. The woman in the plain dress suddenly pointed her sword at Yi Xian below. Listen carefully. Yi Xian looked up at the woman and listened seriously. The woman usually didn't like to speak, but when she did, it was absolutely very, very useful. The woman pointed her sword at the nearby middle-aged man. We swordsmen never waste our breath. Since you've learned the sword from me, then you must remember this. If you can resolve it with your sword, then try not to waste your breath. Just do it. As she spoke, she clamped the green sword between her fingers on her left hand. In the next moment, the expression of the nearby middle-aged man changed drastically. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly drew his sword and then a powerful sword intent shot into the sky from his body. Sword Emperor. It was a sword emperor from the central divine continent. As soon as his monstrous sword intent appeared, everyone in the surroundings felt a strand of invisible pressure press down upon them. Yi Xian's eyes were closed tightly while his body emanated boundless sword intent and battle intent to resist the powerful sword intent. On the other hand, Mo Yunqi's group of three were by his side, and they were resisting the sword emperor's sword intent together. In midair, the middle-aged man held his sword close to the center of his forehead, and a strand of light flickered at the tip of his sword. In the distance, the woman who was about to attack suddenly stopped. Her back was still facing them, so no one here was able to see her appearance clearly, including Yi Xian. Up until now, he still hadn't seen her appearance. The middle-aged man stared fixedly at the woman in the distance. Do you dare to resist a strike of my sword? His voice rumbled like thunder and resounded through the sky. Force. Sword force. For the first time Yi Xian had experienced the force of a swordsman. At this moment the middle-aged man before him carried a strand of force, and it was an extremely formidable force that was much stronger than his own sword force. A truly formidable swordsman. The woman spoke indifferently. You talk too much. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly relaxed her left hand, and then the bamboo sword in her right hand suddenly flew out. It was an extremely ordinary attack. It was truly extremely ordinary. There was no sword force, no sword intent, and there wasn't even a sword glow. Anyone who witnessed it would only have a single thought in their mind: what an ordinary attack. However, at this moment the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. In the next moment his figure leaped up and swiftly swung his sword down. As soon as this attack descended, countless rays of sword light, sword intent, and sword force instantly erupted like a volcano. This attack seemed like it could shatter the boundless world. Yi Xian and the others had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. If this attack descended onto Meteor Mountain, then the entire mountain would definitely be slashed into pieces. The Sword Emperor. This was the Sword Emperor. A single attack could split open a mountain, shatter the ground, and sever a river. He was a true peerless expert in the world. Where's the mysterious woman? Mo Yunqi and the others gazed at the mysterious woman's attack. The difference between the bamboo sword and the middle-aged man's attack was simply like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Or it should be said that the two of them couldn't be compared at all. However, when the bamboo sword arrived before the middle-aged man, everyone watched as the bamboo sword shattered all the sword intent, sword force, sword light, and sword chi that the middle-aged man's sword emanated. In an instant it was practically capable of destroying everything. The bamboo sword suddenly stabbed into the center of the middle-aged man's forehead. The surroundings fell silent once more, and it was deathly silent. Instant annihilation? The eyes of the white-robed old man and the others were filled with disbelief. Or it should be said that it was terror. Terror. It was actually an instant annihilation. That was a sword emperor. Even a sword immortal couldn't instantly annihilate a sword emperor with such ease. That was the reason why they were terrified. Even a sword immortal couldn't instantly annihilate a sword emperor, but the woman before them had. Who exactly is she? The white-robed old man and the others were completely dumbstruck at this moment. On the other hand, the ninth pavilion master of the immortal indulgence shook his head and laughed bitterly in secret. Now he finally understood why the mysterious woman before him hadn't asked the immortal indulgence in for help. At the same time he felt fortunate that the immortal indulgence hadn't gone against Yi Xian to the death like Kuraki Academy had, and they'd stopped in time and tried their best to rope Yi Xian in. Otherwise, the immortal indulgence would have probably suffered a huge setback. This might even be the lightest punishment. Simply speaking, Kuraki Academy was bloody unlucky. Right at this moment, everyone suddenly gazed at the middle-aged man in midair. The middle-aged man stared blankly at the woman while boundless sword intent surged out from within him. Moreover, the sword intent was actually growing stronger and stronger. Breakthrough. The white-robed old man and the others had astounded and disbelief on their faces. This middle-aged man actually intended to break through his sword Dao before his death. The middle-aged man suddenly grinned. So that's how it is. What a pity. As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes lost all color. On the other hand, the iron sword in his hand suddenly fell from midair and landed firmly on the ground. Yi Xian walked over to the iron sword without batting an eyelid, and then he picked it up and tossed it into the world prison pagoda. After that he returned to the side of Mo Yunqi and the others. His expression was calm as if nothing had happened. Mo Yunqi and the others were speechless. In midair, the middle-aged man's body started to be obliterated inch by inch, and in the end he transformed into nothingness. On the other hand, the green sword flew back into the hands of the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress held the bamboo leaf sword in her right hand, and her left hand lightly clamped the bamboo leaf sword down. She just stood there in the bamboo forest. She wore a plain dress while her long hair fluttered in the wind. She didn't speak a single word, and she gave others the feeling that she wasn't a woman of this world at all. No, even the legendary 9 heavens probably didn't have such a woman. Right at this moment the bamboo leaf sword suddenly flew over to Yi Xian, and Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. What's she trying to do? The woman's voice resounded abruptly. Do you know why he broke through just now? Xian hesitated for a moment and then shook his head. The bamboo leaf sword suddenly patted on Xian's shoulder. But Xian's body trembled violently, and he almost cried out in pain. It hurt to the bones. In midair, the woman in the plain dress said coldly, "You only know how to pick up treasures. Look at you." Xian was speechless. The woman in the plain dress's voice was still cold. If a person experienced death, he would instantly understand many things. This is the best process of enlightenment. What you lack now is the foundation and the comprehension of life. You need to comprehend these yourself, and others can't help you. Remember, you never know which will come first, tomorrow or an accident. Always treat today as your last day. Xian hurriedly bowed deeply. Understood. But Xian's left shoulder was struck by the bamboo leaf sword again. Xian jumped up in pain. I understand. In midair, the woman in the plain dress said indifferently, "You heard wrongly. Why, do you have an opinion?" Xian said with grievance, No opinion." The woman in the plain dress snorted, and then turned to look at the white-robed elder and the other two. She said angrily, "What are you looking at? Did I allow you to look?" As her voice fell, a bamboo leaf sword shot out like lightning. Beside the white-robed elder, the head of the black-robed elder flew out without any warning. Chapter 117. Stupefied. The white-robed old man and the bamboo old man were completely stupefied. Killed with a single strike. The black-robed old man hadn't even attacked, yet he was killed just like that? At this moment, both of them were shocked to the extreme. They knew that the person before them was a sword immortal. No, she might not even be an ordinary sword immortal. After all, sword immortals were divided into strong and weak. But the person before them was strong to the point that it exceeded their scope of understanding. How to fight? Just wait for death. Death didn't matter. What they were most worried about was Kuraki Academy and the Dark World. What if this mysterious woman wanted to take revenge? Could the Dark World and Kuraki Academy endure her revenge? Both of them were naturally panicking. After she killed the black-robed old man with a single strike, the woman in a plain dress pointed her bamboo sword at the black-robed old man and the black-robed old man. "Aren't you looking for me? Now are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Xian's face darkened. This mysterious woman is getting naughtier and naughtier. In the sky, the black-robed old man and the bamboo old man had extremely unsightly expressions. In the end, the white-robed old man said in a low voice, "We admit defeat." Admit defeat. Even a sword emperor was instantly killed. They weren't a match for her at all. The woman suddenly said, "Scram." Scram? The white-robed old man and the others were stunned. Tell them to scram? Not kill them? Xian and the others were stunned as well. Why not kill them? Xian said hurriedly, "Kill them." No. At this moment, the bamboo sword slashed down from the sky. Before Xian could react, the bamboo sword struck his shoulder. Flap. The sound was very loud. Xian was in so much pain that he almost cried. It was too painful. The mysterious woman said coldly, "Kill them? Go ahead. Go and beat them to death." Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman pointed at the white-robed old man and the black-robed old man. "You can do whatever you want to those little fellows below. It's best if you kill them. But if someone 2 realms higher than them dares to attack them again, I'll let you know what it means to bully the weak. Now get lost. What kind of rubbish is this? You're wasting my sleeping time every day." The white-robed elder and the bamboo elder looked at each other. In the end, the two of them bowed deeply to the mysterious woman, then turned around and left. However, before they left, the two of them glanced at Xian and the others below. They finally understood. They could target Xian and the others, but they could not bully the weak. Soon, the 2 old men disappeared at the end of the horizon. In the air, the mysterious woman suddenly pointed her sword at Xian. "Follow me." With that, she floated down from the bamboo forest. Xian hesitated. He didn't want to go because his intuition told him that it might not be a good thing. However, he knew that if he didn't go, it might be even worse. Xian followed along, feeling like there was nothing left to live for. Behind them, Mo Yunqi and the other 2 looked at each other. Mo Yunqi said, "He might be beaten up." Bai Zhe nodded. "Yes, he deserves it." Jianji said calmly, "He was beaten up, so he'll definitely come back to beat you guys up." Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai's expressions instantly became slightly unsightly. In the distance outside the bamboo forest, the woman in a plain dress walked slowly in front of them while Yi Xian followed behind her slowly. The woman said indifferently, "Do you know why I didn't kill them?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Senior, please enlighten me." He didn't say that he didn't know, nor did he say that he knew. In any case, he might be beaten up no matter what he said. The woman raised her head and glanced at the sky. "Every time I attack, it's an extremely great burden to you. If I killed those two just now, then that stupid pagoda wouldn't be able to endure it, and you wouldn't be able to endure it either." Yi Xian fell silent. Actually, he'd expected it. Even though he looked very normal now, he knew that the mysterious woman before him had definitely helped him suppress the backlash. But this backlash would come in the end. The mysterious woman suddenly stopped. "Do you know that in this world, especially in some special places, some geniuses will have a Tao protector?" "Tao protector?" Yi Xian was puzzled. The mysterious woman said indifferently, "The so-called Tao protector is to protect the rise of this genius. The rise of any monstrous genius is basically protected by someone from behind, and if there's no one to protect them, then it's very easy for them to perish prematurely. Just like that Xianxia you encountered earlier. She had a Tao protector as well, but you were too weak and were utterly unable to sense it." Yi Xian fell silent. He glanced at the mysterious woman, hesitated for a moment and then said, "Senior, you don't think too much about it." The mysterious woman said abruptly, "I'm not your Tao protector." Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman walked slowly towards the distance while Yi Xian followed slowly. The mysterious woman walked slowly. Her dress was dragging on the ground, yet it didn't cause even a speck of dust to rise. When he saw the mysterious woman remain silent, Yi Xian didn't speak as well. After a short moment, the mysterious woman said in a light voice, "A swordsman's path isn't paved for you by others, nor is it paved for you by others. You have to walk it yourself. Since you've chosen this path, then you can only walk it on your own." When she spoke up to here, she stopped and said, "I've fought too many times for you, and the seal of this pagoda has started to loosen layer by layer. I need to spend a lot of energy and time to suppress it." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Senior, with your strength." The mysterious woman said indifferently, "You want to ask why I was imprisoned in the pagoda with my strength, right?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded because this was exactly what he wanted to know. The mysterious woman said coldly, "Why are you asking so many questions?" Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman continued walking towards the distance. "Your younger sister was taken away?" Yi Xian nodded. The mysterious woman went silent for a moment before she said in a light voice, "She doesn't have a cold physique. He's rather special. If it's possible, you should find her before she attains the Dharma realm." Why? Yi Xian frowned. The mysterious woman said, "She's rather special. If she goes to that place to be trained, she'll definitely improve by leaps and bounds. That kind of improvement speed is very shocking. After attaining the Dharma realm, she needs to suppress it. If she doesn't suppress it, she'll be very strong in a short period of time, but in the future there'll be great drawbacks. She's a good seedling, so don't let any flaws appear." Yi Xian nodded solemnly and said, "I'll go find her as soon as possible. However, Senior," the mysterious woman said indifferently, "you won't be able to understand what's so special about her. I'm also quite surprised that I can meet someone like her in this kind of place. As for what's so special about her, you'll naturally know in the future. In any case, it's a good thing, so don't be anxious." Yi Xian nodded, but he still had some thoughts in his heart. He didn't know if that girl was being bullied over there or not. The mysterious woman suddenly opened her right hand, and the bamboo leaf sword in her palm suddenly floated in all directions. Soon the bamboo leaves all returned to the original bamboo. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's face was filled with envy. "Senior, what's this move called? Can you teach me about it?" The mysterious woman placed her right hand behind her back and said, "The sword is in the heart. My heart contains the heavens and the earth, and the heavens and the earth are my sword. My heart contains the universe, and the universe is my sword. Your level is too low, so you won't understand." Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman's figure gradually turned illusory. "There's another reason I didn't kill those two from before, and it's to deter some small fries. After this, I can't make a move before you find the second Tao law. Not only can I not make a move, but I can't even take a step out of the pagoda. Otherwise you'll die and the pagoda will be destroyed. There's one more thing, that sword in Pine County must be retrieved from me within half a year. If you can't, then I'll break your legs." When she spoke up to hear, she seemed to have thought of something and said, "You better deal with that fellow that's imprisoned on the second level as soon as possible. No matter what method you use, it's best if you're able to make it follow you willingly. Otherwise just wait for death." As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished completely on the spot. Yi Xian was speechless. After a short moment, Yi Xian was about to turn around and leave. Right at this moment, his expression changed drastically, and in the blink of an eye, his entire body fell to the ground while trembling violently. In the dark night, Yi Xian trembled violently, and his entire body was in an extremely twitching state. A Xiao Ta was faintly discernible between his brows. Backlash. Along with the disappearance of the woman in a simple dress, the backlash arrived once more. On the ground, Yi Xian twitched violently, and his entire face had warped into shape. At this moment, he felt as if his entire body was being twisted madly by a force. It was twisted. That sort of feeling was truly painful to the point of wanting to die. Fortunately, the woman in a simple dress didn't continue attacking after that, otherwise the consequences would be even more severe. Right at this moment, Mo Yunqi and the others rushed over, and their expressions instantly turned grim when they saw the state Yi Xian was in. Mo Yunqi hurriedly supported Yi Xian up and said with a trembling voice, "Bandit, are you all right?" Bai Zai hurriedly poured out a gold sore pill for Yi Xian to consume. However, Yi Xian was still twitching violently and he'd curled up into a ball in pain. Seeing this scene, the three of them panicked again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said with a trembling voice, I'm fine, I just need to rest for a while." Mo Yunqi and the others guarded Yi Xian like this until noon, when Yi Xian finally calmed down a lot, and his entire body was already drenched. All of it was sweat. It was from the pain. At night, Yi Xian's consciousness was completely awake. As for Mo Yunqi and the others, they didn't sleep for the entire night. With the support of Mo Yunqi and Jianji, Yi Xian stood up and he smiled faintly. I'm fine." Mo Yunqi and the others didn't speak. Yi Xian's appearance just now was really a little scary. Right at this moment, Ninth Floor Master suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others, and Ninth Floor Master said in a deep voice, "Little friend, your Tsonglan Academy's headquarters is here." Headquarters. Hearing this, Yi Xian and the others instantly frowned. Chapter 118. The Main Courtyard. Yi Xian's group was naturally aware of the academy's main courtyard. They exchanged glances and then Mo Yunqi said in a low voice, "What are they doing here?" The ninth floor master shook his head and said, "I'm afraid they've come with ill intent." "They've come with ill intent." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Let's go have a look." As soon as he finished speaking, he led Mo Yunqi and the others towards Storm Hall. The ninth floor master gazed at their backs, and then he hesitated for a moment before he followed them in the end. Even though he didn't want to interfere in the internal affairs of Storm Hall, he still wanted to help if it was possible. Presently, he wasn't trying to rope in Yi Xian on his side because he was extremely grateful for the guidance the mysterious woman had given him. After all, it was like giving him a new lease on life. Storm Hall. There were 3 young men standing before Yi Xian's group. All of them were young men. This caused Yi Xian's group to be slightly surprised. After all, they hadn't expected that all of them would be so young. The leader of the group was a man in an embroidered robe. His figure was ramrod straight, his gaze was icy cold, and he emanated an aura of being unapproachable. The other 2 men by his side wore ink-white robes, and it was the uniform of Storm Hall. Meanwhile, the man on the left of the man in embroidered robes suddenly walked forward. He glanced at Yi Xian's group, and then his gaze descended onto Yi Xian in the end. He said coldly, "Where's Ji Yun? Ask him to come out and answer me." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Slap. A clear and resounding slap resounded, and then the man who spoke was instantly blasted flying. The eyes of the man in embroidered robes instantly narrowed when he witnessed this scene, and then a formidable aura suddenly swept out from within him. Meanwhile, Bai Zai suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. Bang! The ground instantly collapsed while Bai Zai's figure shot explosively towards the man in embroidered robes like an arrow that had left the bowstring. The man's pupils constricted slightly, and then he suddenly slapped his palm forward. This palm carried a strand of fierce force. Bang! His palm had just descended when his figure was blasted away, and then the ground behind him instantly collapsed. At the same time, a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. The man glanced at his palm that was completely red, and then he gazed at Bai Zhe with disbelief in his eyes. The energy of a demon beast. You actually possess the bloodline of a demon beast. Bai Zhe did not answer the man in the brocade robe. Instead he looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Only then did Bai Zhe release his hand and retreat to Yi Xian's side. Bai Xian gazed at the man. I don I Yi Xian you and I and Yi and Xian, you. Yi Xian. The man in embroidered robes stared fixedly at Yi Xian. The three of us are from the Central Divine Prefecture's main courtyard, yet you actually dare to treat us like this? Yi Xian walked slowly towards the three of them. Meanwhile, the man on the left of the man in embroidered robes was staring fixedly at Yi Xian, and his eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. It was exactly that man who'd been slapped by Yi Xian just now. Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi instantly frowned when they noticed the killing intent in the man's eyes, and they were about to attack again. However, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't attack. We want to subdue them with virtue." Subdue them with virtue. The corners of Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched slightly. Subdue them? Is there anyone who doesn't know that you, Bandit Yi, are a violent maniac? Yi Xian gazed at the man in embroidered robes. Tell me why you've come. The man in embroidered robes stared fixedly at Yi Xian. We've come this time to let you know that you're not allowed to establish an academy with the name Songlan Academy. Not only that, but all the students of your Songlan Academy are not allowed to cultivate the cultivation techniques and martial techniques of my Songlan Academy. In short, my Songlan Academy's main courtyard will not allow a Songlan Academy to appear in Azure Prefecture. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. All of you can go back. The man in embroidered robes frowned. You're brushing us off? Let Jiyun speak. Yi Xian turned around and slapped him. The man in embroidered robes' expression changed drastically, and he raised his arm to block it. Bang! Yi Xian's slap struck the man's arm, and the man's entire body instantly trembled violently. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly pressed forward and struck his knee against the man's abdomen. Bang! The man in embroidered robes was instantly sent flying, and he landed heavily on the ground. Seeing that Yi Xian had suddenly made a move, the remaining two Songlan Academy students were about to make a move, but Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe were faster than them. Bai Zhe directly charged towards one of the students, but Mo Yunqi was even faster. Bang 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 bang. A few breaths later, the two Songlan Academy students were heavily sent flying. Crushing. Without any suspense, it was a crushing defeat. The current Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi, after Yi Xian frantically provided them with cultivation resources, were much stronger than before. Especially Bai Zhe, who had already reached the Nether Passage realm. That physical strength was enough to fight against a Divine Unity realm expert. Even though Mo Yunqi was still a step away from the Nether Passage realm, his speed had long surpassed the Nether Passage realm. In terms of speed, even Yi Xian couldn't catch up to him. Against Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe, if Yi Xian didn't execute a powerful sword technique like one sword determining life and death, he didn't have the confidence to win. In the arena, Yi Xian walked in front of the three people and the three of them had a look of fear. The strength of Yi Xian and his group had completely exceeded their expectations. Yi Xian bowed slightly and his eyes were still closed. Go back and tell the Songlan Academy headquarters that we don't need any help from the headquarters, and we don't want you to come here and tell us what to do. You are you and we are us. Do you understand? The man in embroidered robes stared at Yi Xian. You used the words Songlan Academy. Yi Xian said indifferently, this academy was left behind by Elder Ji and I won't change it. Now the three of you scram immediately. Also, go back and tell the Songlan Academy headquarters that in no time, the four of us will head over to the Songlan Academy headquarters to seek guidance from you. The man in embroidered robes sneered, with just the four of you? Yi Xian didn't answer but turned around and left. The man in embroidered robes still wanted to say something, but Mo Yunqi suddenly said, Big brother, I beg you. Stop whining. If you continue, I'm afraid that Bandit Yi will end you with a sword. It doesn't matter to you in the end, but I'm afraid that you bastards have someone backing you up, And when the time comes, the strong will bully the weak again. It's 2F asterisk king annoying. Listen to my advice, hurry up and scram, I'm doing this for your own good. After speaking, he, Baizhe and Jianji turned around and left. The man in embroidered robes and his group's faces were extremely ugly. It was simply a great humiliation. After a moment, the man in embroidered robes said fiercely, "Let's go back." After speaking, the three of them turned around and left. Not far away, the fifth building master looked at the back of the man in embroidered robes and his group, and sighed in a low voice. Songlan Academy headquarters is also a group of fools. As he spoke, he took a glance at the Songlan Palace. With these kinds of students, don't tell me that their brains are stuck in the door. Naturally, he also knew that the Songlan Academy headquarters did not come to help Dao Yi too. Songlan Academy in Qingzhou had been in decline for too long. Of course, that was in the past, but now with these four little guys, it was not difficult for this side to rise up. Even if the Songlan Academy here did not rise up, the future of Yi Xian and his group was also boundless. Previously, Yi Xian was more dazzling, but just now, in his opinion, in fact, Mo Yunqi, Baizhe and Jianji were not bad or should be said to be very good, not to mention this country of Jiang, even in the entire Qingzhou. Unfortunately, the Songlan Academy's impression of this side was still the same as before. The ninth building master shook his head and sighed, then turned around and left. This kind of matter was also considered as an internal matter of Songlan Academy. Outsiders really could not interfere. Inside the Songlan Palace, four people sat around the table. Mo Yunqi said in a low voice, "If those guys go back, I'm afraid that the Songlan Academy headquarters will soon come to find trouble with us." Yi Xian said softly, "It can't be avoided. What we have to think about is not whether they will come to find trouble with us, but how to become stronger. The four of us are strong enough, so we are not afraid of anyone coming to find trouble with us." Baizhe nodded, "That's true." Yi Xian faced Mo Yunqi. "When will you reach the ethereal opening realm?" Mo Yunqi was silent for a moment and then he said, "A month." Yi Xian shook his head, "Half a month. If you do not reach the ethereal opening realm within half a month, half of your food will belong to Baizhe." Hearing this, Baizhe hurriedly nodded, "Good, that's good." Mo Yunqi glared fiercely at Baizhe, "Half a month it is." Yi Xian nodded and then he faced Jianji. "What about you?" Jianji hesitated for a moment and then he said, "A month." Yi Xian shook his head, "A roast chicken and a roast lamb leg every day." Jianji thought for a moment and then he said, "Half a month." At this point she raised a finger. "Add a pig's trotter and you will reach the ethereal opening realm in 10 days. Yi Xian nodded, "Deal." Jianji nodded, "Deal." At the side, Mo Yunqi suddenly stood up and said angrily, "Bandit Yi, it's not fair, why?" At this moment, Jianji suddenly looked at Mo Yunqi, and a knife had appeared in her hand. Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched. "Sister Ji, I don't mean anything else, I just have a problem with Bandit Yi. Yi Xian stood up and he faced Mo Yunqi. "Although I am the dean, I do not care about individualism. Our Songlan Academy is very democratic and everything can be decided by voting." As he spoke, he faced Jianji. "Who do you vote for?" Jianji said seriously, "You." Mo Yunqi. Yi Xian nodded and then he faced Baizhe. "What about you?" Baizhe hesitated for a moment, and at this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Add more food." Baizhe hurriedly said, "You." Yi Xian turned to Mo Yunqi. 3 against 1, you lost. So, any objections you have are invalid. With that said, he turned and left. Jianji glanced at Mo Yunqi and her expression was unfriendly. She took a bite of the bun and then she also turned and left. Baizhe lightly patted Mo Yunqi's shoulder, shook his head and sighed, "You are so silly." Mo Yunqi. Chapter 119. Cultivate. In the following days, the four of them began to cultivate crazily. As for the recruitment, the four of them had already chosen a date. Once the date arrived, Songlan Academy would officially welcome its first recruitment in decades. With the help of the Jiang country's imperial family and the drunken immortal brothel, the news of Songlan Academy's recruitment quickly spread throughout the country. Currently, countless people from the entire country were rushing to the imperial capital for Songlan Academy's recruitment. Now that Songlan Academy was no longer in the country of Jiang, Songlan Academy was naturally the only choice. In addition, Zhou Xian and the rest were extremely famous. Hence, countless people from all over the country of Jiang came, especially with the support of the drunken immortal brothel and the Jiang country's imperial family. Songlan Academy Back Mountain. In a bamboo forest, Zhou Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with the exquisite spirit sword hovering beside him. Under his control, the sword intent and sword gleam converged towards his eyes. After a moment of silence, Zhou Xian suddenly opened his eyes. The two sword gleams suddenly shot out from his eye sockets like two bolts of lightning. A few dozen feet away, two bamboos were cut at the roots. Sensing this scene, the corners of Zhou Xian's mouth lifted slightly. Although he had cultivated the sword eye previously, he did not have the ability to control it. Now he could accurately control the two sword gleams. However, it was still not enough. Continue to cultivate. In the following days, the four of them continued to cultivate crazily. Although Zhou Xian was the dean, the rest of the matters of Mo Yunqi and the rest were taken care of by him. Every few days, Zhou Xian would go down the mountain to prepare cultivation resources for Mo Yunqi and the rest. Apart from that, Songlan Academy was constantly improving. This money was simply flowing out like water. However, for Songlan Academy, for Mo Yunqi and the rest, this money was worth it. Moreover, he had never regarded this money as his own. Not only was he the dean of Songlan Academy, but he was also the brother and big brother of Mo Yunqi and the rest. As the big brother, he naturally had to take good care of them. When it was time to hit, scold, and protect, he would protect with his life. Time passed bit by bit. There was less than a day left before Songlan Academy's official recruitment. At night, Zhou Xian sat cross-legged in the bamboo forest with his eyes closed. Ling Shujian was still by his side. Within a radius of 300 feet around him, the sword intent spread out like a net. Feel. At this moment he was sensing everything around him. There were 3 steps in the eye of the sword and he was now on the second step. Feel. He used his heart to feel the world. In the past he used to see the world with his eyes, but now he wanted to see the world with his heart. The eyes and the heart were 2 different concepts and also 2 different realms. The eyes could only see the surface, but the heart could see the essence. Zhou Xian just sat there. He had been sitting there for a whole day. During this time he felt the wind, the aura of the earth, the flowers, the trees, and even the clouds in the sky. In the past, when his eyes were still there, he had never carefully felt these things. The mysterious woman told him that as long as he was alive, he should be grateful to this world. At this moment he suddenly understood what the mysterious woman meant. The third step of the sword eye was to think. The so-called thinking was actually comprehension. Sometimes settling down and thinking quietly would be of great benefit to oneself. And he had indeed been too impetuous all these years. Under the moonlight, Zhou Xian sat quietly. The surroundings were silent. On the other side, although Bai Zhe had reached the Nether Passage realm, he had never relaxed because he didn't want to be bullied by Mo Yunqi. If Mo Yunqi became stronger, he would definitely be the first to beat him. It wasn't shameful to be beaten by Bandit Yi, but it was too shameful to be beaten by Mo Yunqi. What Bai Zhe needed to do now was to truly control the power of the demonic beast bloodline in his body. His current physical defense and strength could be said to be unparalleled in the same realm. And now he didn't even have to fear facing a divine unity realm expert. Money. This was all forcefully piled up by money. During this time he didn't stop taking elixirs and all kinds of top-grade tonics. He didn't even know how much money he had spent. Anyway, eating a body-tempering pill cost hundreds of thousands of gold coins. In the back mountain of Mount Azure below, Mo Yunqi ran wildly through the mountains. The number of metal balls on his body had increased. Work hard. Work hard. In this period of time he could be said to be very sullen. Originally, being bullied by Bandit Yi was fine. Now Bai Zhe relied on his Nether Passage realm cultivation to challenge him one-on-one every day. It was called sparring, but in reality, it was to beat him up. This was intolerable. In the mountains, Mo Yunqi roared angrily and increased his speed. His speed was already faster than the wind. His physique was the light physique. But that didn't mean that he didn't need to cultivate. This physique could only be said to have brought him many innate advantages, but if he didn't work hard he would still be ordinary. And his cultivation resources were also huge. Zhou Xian specially found a type of elixir called the Wind Spirit Pill for him. This kind of elixir could stimulate the potential in his body, allowing him to use the surrounding wind to increase his speed. In addition, he also took the Spirit Gathering Pill. because running consumed too much of his energy. If he didn't have this kind of elixir, he wouldn't be able to cultivate for so long in a day. Talent was important, hard work was important, but money was also important. It should be said that money was very important. In the kitchen, Xianxia sat on a small wooden stool. To her left was a pile of wood, and in her hand was a knife as thin as a cicada's wing. At this time she picked up a piece of wood beside her and placed it in front of her. Holding the knife in her right hand, she chopped down. The wood split in the middle. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. Her face was expressionless. Then she took out a steamed bun out of nowhere and took a bite. Following that, she picked up another piece of wood and placed it in front of her. Then she chopped down again. This knife was extremely fast. The entire piece of wood split in the middle. She didn't continue chopping. Instead, she took 2 bites of the steamed bun. Then she took out a chicken leg out of nowhere. In the bamboo forest, Zhou Xian still didn't leave. His sword intent still floated around him. He was already immersed in it. The current him could clearly feel everything around him. It was even more real than what he saw with his eyes. For the first time he realized that there was nothing without eyes. Just like this, he didn't know how long he continued. Then he retracted his sword intent and slowly stood up. Zhou Xian took a deep breath. At this moment he felt extremely comfortable. Unprecedentedly comfortable. Sword eyes. It was also a belief in the sword Tao. It should be said that the sword techniques and cultivation methods that the mysterious woman had taught him were a belief in the sword Tao. Zhou Xian opened his palm and the Spirit Elegance sword flew into it. The Spirit Elegance sword trembled slightly as if it was responding. The degree of fusion was already at 100%. He could now truly utilize the full might of the Spirit Elegance sword. If he reached the Nether Passage realm, then ordinary divine combination realm cultivators wouldn't be a match for him at all. Unless the opponent was an extraordinary genius like Xianxia. When he thought of this woman, the corners of Zhou Xian's mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Xianxia and Yiling were both in the divine central continent. Besides that, he also wanted to explore the divine central continent in the future and see even more extraordinary geniuses. A good man should aim far and wide. He should protect the people he cared about and sleep with the person he liked the most. Zhou Xian laughed and put the Spirit Elegance sword away. As if he had thought of something, he entered the prison pagoda. Inside the prison pagoda, in front of him was the great sword that the Sword Emperor had left behind. The sword was extremely large, about 4 feet long and as fast as 2 palms. It was completely black and exuded traces of red light. A black chain hung from the hilt of the sword. It was obvious that it was used to bind one's hand. The entire sword didn't have a sharp edge. And this sword was at least a light-grade upper-grade sword, 1 rank higher than the Spirit Elegance sword. Zhou Xian was silent for a moment. In the end, he gripped the hilt of the sword with his right hand. However, he was shocked to discover that he actually found it difficult to lift the sword. Zhou Xian circulated the profound energy in his body. The great sword trembled slightly, but it still didn't leave the ground. Zhou Xian frowned. In the end, he gripped the great sword with both hands and forcefully lifted it. The sword trembled and left the ground by about an inch, but it quickly fell back down again. So heavy. Zhou Xian's expression turned serious. The weight of this sword was truly somewhat beyond his imagination. Zhou Xian was a little worried. Devour? He could devour this sword. If he devoured this sword, then he would be able to enter the Nether Passage realm immediately, and the Spirit Elegance sword might even be able to advance to the light grade upper grade. But that would be a waste of this sword. Even though he couldn't lift this sword now, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be able to in the future. As if he'd thought of something, Zhou Xian left the World Prison Pagoda. At the same time, he moved the great sword out of the World Prison Pagoda. As he felt the great sword before him, Zhou Xian gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands. He used the iron chain to bind his hands to the hilt of the sword, and then he squatted slightly. In next to no time, the word earth appeared between his brows. Tao Law. He hadn't forgotten that he had the Tao Law as his trump card. The ground beneath Zhou Xian's feet trembled violently. In next to no time, boundless energy of the earth converged towards him. A ferocious smile appeared on the corners of Zhou Xian's mouth, and he suddenly lifted the great sword by relying on the energy of the earth. At this moment, the muscles on his arms bulged. As he held the great sword in hand, Zhou Xian turned around and dashed madly all along the way, and the ground trembled with every step he took. In next to no time, Yi Xian arrived before a small mountain, and Mo Yunqi just happened to be running down from it. He was slightly stunned when he saw Yi Xian and then he chuckled. "Bandit Yi, you've come at the right time. I've just broken through into the nether passage realm. Come, let me beat you up." Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and then he suddenly slashed his sword down towards the small mountain. Under Mo Yunqi's gaze, the small mountain crumbled with a loud bang. Not only that, but the ground within a 500-meter radius around the two of them cracked open in an instant. The earth trembled and the mountains swayed like a great earthquake. It was incomparably terrifying. Mo Yunqi gulped when he witnessed this scene, and he had a dazed expression. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look at Mo Yunqi. "Beat me up?" Chapter 120. Stop. Yi Xian suddenly stretches out his right hand to stop Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi looks at Yi Xian and is a little cautious. It should be said that he is on guard. He knows that Yi Xian often likes to start a fight at the slightest provocation. Yi Xian does not make a move. He lightly pats Mo Yunqi's shoulder. "Those words just now were from the bottom of your heart?" Mo Yunqi hurriedly nods. Yes, it was definitely from the bottom of my heart." Yi Xian nods, and then say it twice. Mo Yunqi. In the end, Mo Yunqi says it a few more times before Yi Xian turns around and leaves. Looking at Yi Xian's departing back, Mo Yunqi squats on the ground and crazily vomits. So fucking shameless. After a moment, Mo Yunqi stands up. He clenches his fists and his eyes are filled with determination. "Today's humiliation, I will return it to this bandit Yi tenfold in the future." After saying that, he lets out a strange cry and runs away crazily. Yi Xian returns to the bamboo forest. Inside the prison pagoda, feeling the great sword in front of him, Yi Xian's mouth slightly raises. He finally decides not to devour this great sword. Because after he activates the power of the earth, he can use this great sword. When he used this huge sword, there was an additional force in his sword. Pure overbearing power. It can be said that after he activates the power of the earth, using this sword to determine life and death will definitely have a miraculous effect. After a moment, Yi Xian's mouth slightly raises. "This sword is so big and so black, let's call it Big Black. Big Black Sword." After saying that, he laughs mischievously. Obviously, he is very satisfied with this name that he came up with. In the field, Yi Xian estimates his own strength. Although he has not reached the ethereal opening realm, he can reach it at any time. After all, he has money now. And now, his biggest trump card, other than one sword to determine life and death, is the Sword Eye. This Sword Eye can definitely have a miraculous effect. In addition, he also has Dao laws. The power of the Dao laws could be superimposed, and a single sword strike could determine life and death. Sword momentum, sword intent, battle intent, power of the earth. One sword to decide life and death, these 5 superimposed. This was his true strongest trump card. As for the world prison pagoda, he would rather die than activate it. It was 2F*** king painful. Yi Xian returned to the bamboo forest. He raised his head to look at the horizon. At this moment, the image of a woman appeared in his mind. Her clothes were as white as snow, spotless. And Xianxia. I wonder to what extent she has grown. A moment later Yi Xian grinned. "Xiaoan, wait for me." With that he turned around and walked into the distance. Yi Xian went to the kitchen. Xianxia was still chopping wood. When she saw Yi Xian she stopped, but there was still half a bun in her mouth. Yi Xian smiled. "Follow me down the mountain to buy something." Xianxia did not refuse. He put away his saber and followed Yi Xian down the mountain. The sky was already bright. There were less than 4 hours before Tsonglan Academy's official recruitment. On the street, Yi Xian and Xianxia strolled slowly. Soon Yi Xian and Xianxia arrived at the Drunken Immortal Inn. The one serving Yi Xian was a woman named Xiaogu. She looked delicate and pretty. She obviously knew Yi Xian's identity. Hence she was very polite. Yi Xian smiled. "Buying clothes." Xiaogu glanced at Xianxia and smiled. "Young master Yi, Miss Ji, follow me." With that she led Yi Xian and Xianxia to a place not far away. Yi Xian sat in a private room. Not long later Xiaogu brought Xianxia to Yi Xian. At this moment, Xianxia had already changed into a dress. At this moment, Xianxia was wearing a dark green smoky robe and a green leaf skirt. It was neither too big nor too small. It was just fitting and made her slender figure look even more alluring. Although she was serious, she did not have that kind of cold aura. On the contrary, she gave off a feeling of weakness, making people want to approach her uncontrollably. Xian smiled. Do you like it? Xianxia nodded. I like it. Xian smiled. It's good that you like it. With that, he turned to Xiaogu, who was beside Xianxia. Also, give me a few sets of men's clothes according to my figure. Also, give me a few sets that are one size bigger than mine. Yunqi and Bai Zai naturally had to change into better clothes. After all, there was an important occasion today. However, they were all men, so it was fine to be casual. Xianxia was different. She was a woman. It was better to come out and try it on personally. Xiaogu smiled. Understood. With that, she turned to leave. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, More. Xiaogu looked at Xianxia. Xianxia said, I want everything that you saw just now. Xiaogu was stunned, then quickly said, All right. With that, she turned and left. Xianxia sat in front of Xian. She picked up a fruit from the table and started nibbling on it. After a while, she suddenly looked at Xian. Why? Xian was not stupid. Naturally, he knew what Xianxia meant. He pondered for a moment, then said, I know. Previously, you wanted to bring back the corpses of the students from Tsang Mountain's Shaodao. You have been under a lot of pressure. Also, there is old Ji's revenge, his wish, and Songlan Academy. Don't think too much. I will take care of everything first. Xianxia looked at Xian and did not say anything. Xian continued, I gave the three of you a gold card. There is a lot of money in it. Don't be too harsh on yourselves. Especially you. You are so beautiful. You still have to buy clothes when you need them. With that said, he felt a little emotional. When old Ji was around, Songlan Academy was really too poor. Until now, he realized that Xianxia did not have more than 2 sets of clothes. Moreover, they were the very, very old kind. As for cultivation resources, although they were not lacking, they were definitely not much. It should be said that they were pathetically few. Yet she had cultivated to this level. It was hard for him to imagine how this woman in front of him managed to do so in the past. Xianxia bit the apple and did not speak. At this time, Xiaogu brought a large box into the private room. Xian kept the box in the prison pagoda. He was about to pay when Xiaogu quickly said, Young Master Yi, I dare not accept your money. These are all free gifts from our drunken immortal into young Master Yi. I hope young Master Yi does not refuse. Xian shook his head and smiled. That won't do. Friendship is friendship, but I still have to pay. Otherwise, I will not buy anything here. As he said that, he took out a money bag and handed it to Xiaogu. I think this should be enough. Xiaogu was a little hesitant. Xian had already turned and left with Xianxia. Xiaogu quickly went to send them off. On the street, Xian walked slowly while Xianxia followed slowly. It was unknown when she had a chicken drumstick in her hand. Neither of them spoke as their shadows grew longer and longer. An hour later, a red sun slowly rose from the horizon. A new day had begun. On this day, countless people rushed towards Songlan Academy. Entered Songlan Academy. Without a doubt, this was the goal of countless youths in the country of Jiang. Now the entire country of Jiang no longer had Kuraki Academy. If these youths wanted to stand out, joining Songlan Academy was undoubtedly a good choice. One had to know that entering the academy meant that there would be someone to teach them and also cultivation resources. On this day, the foot of Jiyun Mountain was filled with a sea of people. There were too many people. When Xian and the other 3 looked down from the mountain, they were already stunned. The 4 of them did not expect that there would be so many people. Beside Xian, Yunqi suddenly said, Yi Bandit Yi, there are too many people. Xian smiled. Good news. A large number of people represented the reputation of Songlan Academy. Yunqi nodded and said with some excitement, I didn't expect that Yunqi would also be a mentor. Songlan Academy did not have any experts overseeing it. Therefore the 4 of them were all mentors. Apart from being mentors, the 4 of them were also responsible for some other matters in Songlan Academy. In any case, wherever there was a shortage of people, the 4 of them would go there. Today the 4 of them specially dressed up, especially Xianxia. She was originally good-looking, and now that she was wearing a brand new dress, she was even more beautiful. Looking at the increasing number of people below, Xian said softly, If only old Ji was still here. Old Ji. Hearing this, the smiles of Mo Yunqi and the other two instantly froze. Ji Anji clenched her fists tightly and did not speak. After a moment, Yi Xian looked up at the sky. Old Ji, watch carefully. In the future, Songlan Academy will become the best academy in Qingzhou. No, the best academy in the entire firmament world. After saying that, he walked down the mountain. Mo Yunqi and the other two followed closely. Soon Yi Xian and the other three arrived at the foot of the mountain. When they saw Yi Xian and the other three, the crowd instantly became excited. Some people even started to call out the names of the four. Beside Yi Xian, Mo Yunqi put his hands behind his back and looked serious. Bai Zai also straightened his back and looked very serious. Ji Anji's right hand was hidden behind his back. In his hand there was a chicken drumstick. Yi Xian suddenly raised both of his hands slowly and then gently pressed down. In an instant the crowd instantly became quiet. Yi Xian took a step forward. Mo Yunqi subconsciously wanted to take a step forward, but was pulled back by Bai Zai. Bai Zai glared at Mo Yunqi. Bandit Yi wants to speak, why are you causing trouble? Mo Yunqi. Below, everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Welcome everyone to Songlan Academy. I am Songlan Academy's Dean Yi Xian. Today my Songlan Academy is recruiting 30 students. These 30 students must go through 3 rounds of assessment. Those who pass the assessment will immediately become our academy's student. Of course, after the quota is filled, there are still people who can pass the 3 rounds of assessment. They can also enter my Songlan Academy. Hearing that, countless people below instantly cheered. Hearing this, countless people below instantly cheered. Since Yi Xian said that, there was no doubt that they had a few more chances. Yi Xian smiled and continued. The assessment will be handled by our academy's mentor, Mo Yunqi. Now let him explain to everyone. After saying that, he stood to the side. Mo Yunqi took a deep breath. He took a step forward and looked at the dense crowd below. Mo Yunqi felt his heart beating faster. Mo Yunqi took another deep breath and forcefully suppressed the nervousness in his heart. He smiled slightly. Hello everyone, I am Mo Jiaomao. Saying this, he suddenly stopped as if something was wrong. Everyone. Chapter 121. Mo Yunqi. As soon as these 3 words were spoken, the surroundings suddenly quietened down. So quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. At this moment, Mo Yunqi was completely stunned. What did I say? He looked at Bai Zai and Bai Zai looked at him with a strange expression. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly stood out. Everyone, please don't take offense, Instructor Mo really likes to joke. Mo Yunqi hurriedly said, right, a joke. Hello everyone, I am Songlan Academy's Instructor Mo Yunqi. Everyone can call me Instructor Mo in the future. The assessment this time is divided into 3 stages, and I will be presiding over all 3 stages. I hope everyone will work hard. Examiner. Hearing this, the countless people below hurriedly withdrew their smiles. This was someone they absolutely could not offend. Yi Xian stood out once again. The assessment begins. The first stage was the great waves washing the sand. There was a huge formation beneath Songlan Mountain, and this formation was set up by the drunken immortal brothel in Jianghua. The purpose of this formation was to test the endurance of these people. To be more precise, it was to test their strength, and it had the effect of the great waves washing the sand. Because there were truly too many people. And amongst these people there would definitely be a lot of strength. As soon as Yi Xian's voice resounded, a shapeless pressure suddenly enveloped the crowd below. At the beginning it was still fine, but gradually many people were unable to hold on any longer. Before long some people had already started to withdraw. At this moment, a middle-aged man and old man suddenly arrived before Yi Xian and the others. Yi Xian was stunned. He knew this middle-aged man and old man. These 2 people were none other than Qingqing's Li family's patriarch, Li Yu, and Zhang family's patriarch, Zhang Lai. Yi Xian hurriedly walked before the 2 of them. Seniors, why have you come? Seeing that Yi Xian still recognized them, Li Yu and Zhang Lai were obviously slightly excited, and they hurriedly bowed deeply. Greetings, Dean Yi. Yi Xian shook his head. Seniors, please don't be like this, just call me Yi Xian. Although he had fought many battles with these 2 families when he was the heir of the Yi clan, He had never forgotten the help these two and the city lord Zhang Yan had given him and his sister when they left Qingqing. Seeing how amiable Yi Xian was, the smiles on Li Yu and Zhang Lai's faces widened. Li Yu cupped his fists and said with a smile, "This time, the two of us have brought our clan's juniors to participate in Songlan Academy's recruitment." The corners of Yi Xian's mouth lifted slightly. "Who are they?" Li Yu pointed at two men in the distant crowd. "It's those two, they both want to join Songlan Academy." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I can't practice favoritism." Li Yu quickly said, "If they can't rely on their own ability to enter Songlan Academy, then it's their own fault." Zhang Lai also laughed, "Yes, they are all proud of you. If you were to open the back door for them, they would not be willing." Right now, almost everyone in Qingqing was proud of Yi Xian. The entire city was famous in the country of Jiang. Yi Xian smiled, "The men of my city should have such backbone." Li Yu hesitated for a moment and hesitated to speak. Yi Xian asked, "What's wrong?" Li Yu sighed softly, "The city governor Zhang Yan has passed away." "Passed away?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Why?" Li Yu said in a low voice, "Brother Jiang failed in his breakthrough and suffered backlash, and he died 3 days ago. However, according to our guesses, he might have been assassinated." Yi Xian's brows knit together even more tightly when he heard this. Assassinated? Li Yu nodded. It might be his brother Jiang Gu, because he became the city governor after brother Jiang perished. Moreover, brother Jiang's wife and son were driven out of the city governor's estate. If it wasn't for the help of our clans, they would have probably died a violent death by now. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, "Once the two of you return, I'll notify the king to send someone to Qingqing to investigate this matter and give Senior Zhang Yan justice." Li Yu and Zhang Lai bowed deeply to Yi Xian when they heard this. Yi Xian sighed with emotion. He hadn't been in Qingqing for long, yet the city had probably changed. Meanwhile, Li Yu hesitated for a moment and said, "Actually, someone from your Yi clan has come to participate in the recruitment of Azure Snow Academy as well." Yi Xian was stunned when he heard this. "Someone from the Yi clan has come as well?" Li Yu pointed at a young girl in the nearby crowd. The young girl was around 17 or 18 years old, wore a tight dress and had a small braid on the back of her head. At this moment her fists were clenched tightly while she gritted her teeth, and sweat was already dripping down her face. "Xian." Yi Xian frowned slightly. He naturally knew the young girl. She was the granddaughter of the Yi clan's elder Yi Qing. He'd met her a few times while he was in the Yi clan, but they didn't have much of an interaction. Li Yu glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "The Yi clan isn't doing very well now." Yi Xian shook his head. "I have nothing to do with the Yi clan anymore." Li Yu sighed softly when he heard this. The more outstanding Yi Xian was, the more miserable the Yi clan was. Presently, the Yi clan was practically the laughingstock of the entire state of Jiang. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Seniors, would you like to have a drink or two with me?" Li Yu hurriedly shook his head. No. We'll stay here and accompany those two little fellows." Yi Xian smiled and said, "All right, I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave first." Li Yu smiled and said, "Go ahead." Yi Xian nodded and then he turned around and left with Xianxia and Bai Zai. Li Yu sighed softly as he watched Yi Xian leave. "He's still very loyal. Brother Zhang Yan, you can rest in peace." Zhang Lai nodded. "Our choice was right at that time, and this Yi clan." "Sigh," Li Yu said indifferently, "they brought this upon themselves so they can't blame anyone." Yi Xian brought Xianxia and Bai Zai back to the Kanglan Hall, while Mo Yunqi was still in charge of the examination below. The three of them sat around the table. Yi Xian faced Xianxia and said, "I asked the Drunken Immortal restaurant to help me find a group of chefs. You'll be in charge of these chefs." Xianxia hurriedly nodded. "All right." At this moment Bai Zai suddenly said, "Bandit Yi, do you want to hire some handymen to take care of the students' daily lives?" Yi Xian shook his head. "There's no need. All the students will deal with their daily lives, such as washing clothes and other messy matters. They came here to cultivate, to learn, not to enjoy themselves." Bai Zai thought for a moment. "All right." Yi Xian continued, "Old Bai, there will be some erudite scholars coming later. Although these people aren't strong, they are very knowledgeable. You'll be in charge of taking good care of them." Also, later tell Mo Yunqi that the students must show sufficient respect to these scholars. Otherwise they will be expelled from the academy and never to be hired again. Not only the students but we also have to show respect to these scholars. Don't be rude. Bai Zai nodded. All right. Xian said softly, to cultivate one must first cultivate the person. The students are like this and so are we. Bai Zai hesitated for a moment and said, Bandit Yi, do you really want our Kanglan Academy to become the largest academy in the Azure Firmament world? Xian nodded. If we're going to do it, let's do it big. Bai Zai glanced at Xian. All right, if we're going to do it, let's do it big. Ji Anji glanced at Xian and didn't say anything. Time passed very quickly. Very quickly it was nighttime. All the students had basically completed their examinations. A total of 42 people passed all the examinations. In front of Kanglan Hall, Mo Yunqi led the 42 people to the front of Xian's group. The 42 people bowed to Xian in unison and said in unison, Greetings, Dean. Xian nodded slightly. Entering my Kanglan Academy means that everyone is one of us in the future. There are no rules for the academy for now, but it will be made soon. As for the cultivation mentors, there are only 4 of us for now. In the future we will recruit more good mentors. For now, all of you just have to put up with it. Hearing this, many students below couldn't help but laugh. Xian turned to look at Bai Zai. Are those scholars here? Bai Zai was about to speak. At this moment, not far away, 3 people slowly walked over. 2 old men and a woman. The woman sat in a wheelchair and wore a black dress. This woman Xian recognized. It was State Preceptor Lu Zhaoge. Xian was stunned. Then he hurriedly went over to welcome her. State Preceptor Lu Yu? Lu Zhaoge smiled. Am I not welcome? Xian shook his head and smiled. Of course you are welcome. However, are you sure you want to be my Kanglan Academy's mentor? Let me say this first. The remuneration isn't high. Lu Zhaoge chuckled. It's fine. As she spoke, she gently gestured to the 2 old men beside her. These 2 are Senior Mo Yuan and Senior Feng Lan. They are both academic experts. Xian hurriedly led Bai Zai and the other 2 to bow deeply to the 2. Seeing Xian and the other 3 being so polite, the 2 old men also smiled. They also cupped their fists and bowed to Xian and the other 3. Xian smiled. Seniors, State Preceptor Lu, the 2 of you are responsible for the students' academic lessons. As for what to teach, the 2 of you can decide. Mo Yuan sized up Xian. Old man has a question. Xian smiled. Senior, please ask. Mo Yuan said, why do we have to arrange academic lessons? According to my knowledge, Songlan Academy and Kanglan Academy cancelled academic lessons a few hundred years ago. Xian pondered for a moment and said, a person shouldn't only be judged by strength. In this world, strength is very important, but being a person is equally important. Mo Yuan nodded slightly. It's rare for you to have such thoughts. Xian cupped his fists to the 3 of them. Songlan Academy has just been rebuilt and there are still many inadequacies. If we have neglected you in any way, I hope the 3 of you can forgive us. Mo Yuan shook his head. These are all trivial matters. However, the matter of the books. Xian smiled. Don't worry. I've already asked the Drunken Immortal Pub to collect all sorts of books. When the time comes, I'll hand them over to the 3 of you to deal with. Mo Yuan lightly stroked his beard. That's good. Xian led the 3 of them over to the group of students. He said with a serious expression, these 3 seniors will be my Songlan Academy's mentors in the future. They will be responsible for your academic lessons and they will set up the tests. If you can't pass the academic lessons, then you will be expelled from Songlan Academy after 2 failures and will never be hired again. Academic lessons? The students below were dumbfounded. Xian asked again, is there a problem? If there is, then come out and we'll fight one-on-one. Everyone, Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched. This bandit. Seeing that no one spoke, Xian nodded. He was about to speak when suddenly, a laugh came from afar. We have a problem. Everyone looked over. Not far away, for people were slowly walking over. The leader was a man in a luxurious robe. He held a folding fan in his hand and a smooth white jade was tied around his waist. The man in the luxurious robe sized up Xian and smiled. So the dean of Songlan Academy is blind. Oh, you asked if I have a problem. I have a problem. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the man in the luxurious robe. The latter's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to retreat, a sword directly pierced through his forehead. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Sheathing the sword, Yi Xian said indifferently, "You have a problem? Sorry, I don't want to hear it." Chapter 122. The place was silent. All the students stared blankly at Yi Xian. Wasn't this dean too domineering? Bai Zai and Mo Yunqi were calm. They were very familiar with Yi Xian's character. This fellow was extreme. If you treated him well, he would treat you very well. However, if you were to become his enemy, he would kill without batting an eyelid. Not far away, Mo Yuan and Feng Lan glanced at Yi Xian without saying anything. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and faced the remaining three people. At this moment, the three of them were horrified and kept retreating. He killed someone just like that. Are you kidding me? Most importantly, he killed someone just like that. The three of them were horrified. Yi Xian faced the three of them. Do you have any questions? He wasn't a homicidal maniac, but these people obviously didn't come with good intentions. Since they came with bad intentions, he naturally had to kill them. In front of Yi Xian, the three of them looked at Yi Xian with fear in their eyes. At this moment, one of them said in a deep voice, "The four of us are from Chu. This time we came to confirm whether our Chu's third prince died in your hands in the mystic realm." Chu's third prince? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Then he remembered. It was the silver-armored man. Yi Xian nodded. He died in my hands. Why, do you have any questions? Questions? The three's faces twitched. At this moment they naturally wouldn't force themselves or say anything. The three of them didn't say anything and turned to leave. Wait. Yi Xian suddenly said. Hearing this, the three's expressions changed. The three of them turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian pointed at the corpse on the ground. Take it away. The three of them didn't dare to say anything. They carried the corpse and left. Yi Xian turned to the students of Songlan Academy. Study well and cultivate well. After saying this, he turned and walked away. In the field, the students looked at each other. At the side, Feng Lan shook her head. Too vicious. Lu Jioga shook his head. Elder Feng is wrong. Feng Lan looked at Lu Jioga. Lu Jioga said softly, "He's intimidating us." Intimidation. Feng Lan frowned. I think it's making enemies for no reason. Lu Jioga smiled and said, If I'm not wrong, the drunken immortal brothel should have informed him of the identities of these four people in advance. In other words, he already knows that this matter cannot be resolved peacefully. Since there was no way to resolve this peacefully, he chose to use the most direct method to deal with this matter. Feng Lan said in a low voice, There's a sword immortal behind him. Has the Chu country gone crazy? Lu Jioga said with a smile. He has a sword immortal backing him. Elder Jiang, 9th floor lord, the people from the Dark World and Kuraki College's headquarters know, but do the others know? The rest of the people who know are all dead. Feng Lan fell silent. Lu Jioga said softly. The two of you, your Confucian school was nearly wiped out in the firmament world in the past. If you want to rise again, you must change your way of thinking. As for this Dean Yi, he might be your best choice. The two fell silent. Lu Jioga leaned back on his wheelchair and said, He sincerely wants to establish Azure Billow College, and he doesn't wish for the people in his college to only know how to cultivate. This can be said to be your chance. Mo Yuan glanced at Lu Jioga. What about you? What are you militarists plotting? Jiangjiu? Lu Jioga smiled slightly and did not speak. Inside Azure Billow Hall, Yi Xian and company sat around a table. Yi Xian's right hand gently tapped on the table. He did not speak. At this moment, Mo Yunqi suddenly said, Those two elders are not simple. With that said, he looked at Bai Zai. Where did you find them? Bai Zai smiled sheepishly. It was Imperial Preceptor Lu who helped me find them. Imperial Preceptor Lu. Mo Yunqi looked at Yi Xian. Bandit Yi, what do you think? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment. He said, Everything will remain the same. We just need to be careful. Mo Yunqi nodded. That's all we can do. Yi Xian said, From now on, the four of us will take turns teaching these students besides cultivating. Also, you will be in charge of the distribution of cultivation resources. Xianxia nodded. Yi Xian pointed at Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai. The two of you, your current goal is to build a good foundation for the Nether Passage realm and then break through to the Divine Unity realm. We still have many things to do. Mo Yunqi nodded. Understood. Yi Xian stood up. In half a year I will head to Azure Prefecture's Great Cloud Empire. In a year we will head to the Divine Central Continent. Do you have a problem kowtowing to Grandmaster? Mo Yunqi hesitated and then said, just kowtowing? Yi Xian shook his head. There's no need to think about it. We will fight first then kowtow. Mo Yunqi smiled bitterly. Are we going to attack Azure Prefecture first, then the Divine Central Continent? Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand. Since the strong are respected in this world, then we will be the strong. Mo Yunqi slammed the table and said angrily, yes, be the strong. Damn it, Kanglan General Academy looks down on us. We will let them know that we are stronger than them. We will fight for Old Man Ji. Bai Zai also slammed his palm on the table, but this slap directly smashed the table into pieces. Bai Zai, Mo Yunqi glanced at Bai Zai. What are you trying to say? Bai Zai said solemnly, fight Kanglan General Academy. Fight them. Even if they don't fight us we will still fight them. Not for anything else, just to fight for our honor. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Cultivate well. I hope that in the future no matter who walks at the forefront when we look back we will all still be here. Finished speaking he turned and walked outside. Inside the hall Bai Zai suddenly stood up and glared at Mo Yunqi. Hurry up and cultivate. I don't want to have to collect your corpse one day. Finished speaking he also turned and left the hall. Mo Yunqi gritted his teeth angrily. You are too damn looking down on me. Just you wait, all of you wait. Finished speaking he turned and disappeared on the spot. Inside the hall, Xianxia gently nibbled on a chicken drumstick. After Yi Xian left Kanglan Hall he was about to walk to the back of the mountain when he suddenly stopped and turned to look behind him. Behind him stood a petite girl. Yexing. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Xian. Obviously she was somewhat afraid of Yi Xian. She clenched her dress tightly and didn't dare to speak. What's the matter? Yi Xian asked. Yi Xian lowered her head and walked in front of Yi Xian. Cousin brother. Yi Xian shook his head. Call me Dean. Yi Xian lowered her head even more, her body slightly twitching. Yi Xian lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. Here I am the dean and you are the student. We are still family. Finished speaking he turned and left. Hearing this Yi Xian looked up at Yi Xian. Looking at him she suddenly smiled. Family. They were still a family. It's already very good. Yi Xian wiped the tears on her face. She felt extremely relaxed. In the distance Yi Xian slowly walked towards the bamboo forest. Yi clan? He really didn't feel anything anymore. He could never return to that place. Inside the bamboo forest Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. Soon his sword intent spread out in all directions. Eye of the sword. What he needed to do now was to cultivate the eye of the sword to the extreme. This was also one of his trump cards. Cultivate. Yi Xian and the other three were still cultivating like crazy. Jiang Country's Imperial Palace. On this day, a middle-aged man came to Jiang Country's Imperial Palace. On the dragon throne the king of Jiang Country, Jiang Yuan, glanced at the man and smiled. An envoy from Chu Country. How is your king? The middle-aged man said coldly. Not good. The officials of the state of Jiang instantly frowned when they heard this. Jiang Yuan frowned slightly as well and he was slightly displeased. The middle-aged man said, King of Jiang Country, my country's third prince was killed by a student of your country's Songlan Academy, Yi Xian, in the Ning country's secret realm. Your country must give my country an explanation for this matter. Jiang Yuan's expression was slightly strange when he heard this. The middle-aged man was clearly slightly furious. He killed my country's third prince and his 9 generations should be executed. Meanwhile Jiang Yuan shook his head. I'm sorry. Yi Xian is a member of my Jiang country. It's not Chu country's place to criticize him. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. What? Jiang country intends to protect him? Jiang Yuan's expression turned cold as well. Yes, my Jiang country intends to protect him. The middle-aged man stared fixedly at Jiang Yuan. Jiang country doesn't hesitate to become enemies with Chu country for the sake of Yi Xian? Jiang Yuan spoke indifferently. My Jiang country has no intention of becoming enemies with Chu country. However, Xian is a member of my Jiang country. My Jiang country won't allow anyone to touch him." The middle-aged man's expression instantly became unsightly when he heard this. Obviously, he hadn't expected that the Jiang country would protect Xian like this. None of the ministers in the hall said anything. They naturally knew of Xian. He was a miraculous young man who'd personally annihilated Kuraki Academy. Even an idiot would know that he wasn't simple. The middle-aged man sneered. "Jiang country. Just you wait." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Within the hall, Zhang Yuan spoke indifferently. "Send someone to Tsanglan Academy and tell Lord Yi to be careful of Chu country's dirty tricks." Yes. Chu country. Chu country was situated at the north of Jiang country, and it was quite far away from Jiang country. Because of this, there hadn't been any conflict between Chu country and Jiang country. Chu country's imperial palace. Bang! A muffled sound suddenly resounded within the hall, and then a furious shout suddenly resounded. "Jiang country." The person who spoke was a middle-aged man in a dragon robe. This middle-aged man was the king of Chu country, Zhou Xian. A beautiful woman in palace attire stood by Zhou Xiaotian's side, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Your Majesty, Honor must be avenged. Otherwise, how would he be able to rest in peace?" Zhou Xiaoan stared fixedly at the middle-aged man before him. "Jiang country really intends to protect him?" The middle-aged man hurriedly nodded. "Yes." The king of Jiang country even spoke arrogantly. He said that if Chu country dared to touch Xian, he would definitely make Chu country pay a terrible price. "Good. Very good." Zhou Xiaotian's expression was slightly savage. Jiang country. They actually didn't hesitate to go to war with Chu country for Xian. Right at this moment, an old man in the hall spoke abruptly. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid this matter isn't simple." Zhou Xiaoan gazed at the old man, and the old man spoke in a low voice. "I've already investigated. That young man Xian isn't an ordinary person. Be careful of his age. Even though he's only at the Ascension realm, he's already capable of killing Nether Passage realm experts. Besides that, all those geniuses that went to the secret realm that day, including Dayun Granary Academy's Gan died at his hands." Gan Zhou Xiaotian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. "That's a genius on the martial rankings." The old man continued. "Besides that, according to the old man's investigation, Jiang country's Granary Academy has already been annihilated. Even though it was assisted by the Jiang country's imperial family and the drunken immortal inn, it's undeniable that this young man is definitely not simple. Otherwise, those two powers wouldn't have helped him like this. According to the old man's inference, there's definitely a great power or an extraordinary expert standing behind him." Zhou Xiaoan gradually calmed down. "Continue." The old man bowed slightly. Gan Shisan was a top student of Dayun Granary Academy. Since he was killed, how could Dayun Granary Academy let the matter rest? But until now, that young man and those students from Tsanglan Academy are still alive and well. This is already abnormal. Besides that, those geniuses that went to the secret realm that day all have some great powers behind them. These powers have all sent people to Jiang country to take revenge, but until now there's no news of them at all. Zhou Xiaoan slowly clenched his fists tightly. "Have you found out who's behind him?" The old man shook his head. "There's no clue at all. Your Majesty, this person is extremely not simple. The old man suggests that we really shouldn't provoke him." Then Honor died just like that. At this moment, the beautiful woman in palace attire nearby suddenly spoke angrily. The old man glanced at the beautiful woman in palace attire and didn't speak. Zhou Xiaotian's expression was extremely gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. The beautiful woman in palace attire still wanted to say something, but Zhou Xiaotian glared at her. The beautiful woman instantly didn't dare to say anything and just sobbed incessantly. A moment later, Zhou Xiaoan looked at the old man not far away. "You can't find anything at all?" The old man shook his head. "I've already used all the spies but found nothing." Zhou Xiaotian's expression instantly darkened. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from outside the door. "How can I not avenge the death of my son?" Zhou Xiaoan looked over and saw a man in black robes standing outside the door. In an instant, more than a dozen golden armored guards appeared in the main hall. The man in black robes said indifferently, I'm from Tang country representing my country's king. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Tang country? The man in black robes smiled. My country's king asked your country on my behalf if you want to divide up Jiang country. Zhu Xian sneered. Do you think we can divide up just because you say so? The man in black robes smiled. What if Great Cloud Realm's Kuraki Academy takes action? Zhu Xiaotian's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this. The man in black robes smiled. There are indeed people standing behind Xian. However, Great Cloud Realm's Kuraki Academy has already agreed that they'll deal with the people standing behind Xian. We just have to march straight into Jiang country. At that time, a single Xian will be as easy as crushing an ant before our army. Zhu Xian stared fixedly at the man in black robes. How can I believe you? The man in black robes tapped with his finger, and a command token appeared before Zhu Xian. The command token was carved from a piece of wood, and the words Great Cloud were written on the north side while the words Kuraki Academy were written on the front. Great Cloud Realm Wood Command Token. Zhu Xian still shook his head. One command token isn't enough. Right at this moment, a white-robed old man suddenly appeared within the main hall. The expressions of everyone present changed when they saw this person. The man in black robes bowed deeply to the white-robed old man. Senior. The white-robed old man was the guardian of Kuraki Academy who'd headed to Jiang country to kill that mysterious woman. It wasn't the Pine Prefecture's Kuraki Academy, it was the guardian of Kuraki Academy from the Central Divine Prefecture. He was an expert above the peak of the Myriad Dao realm. The white-robed old man glanced indifferently at Zhu Xiaotong. We'll deal with the people standing behind Xian. If your Chu Kingdom and Tang Kingdom conquer the Jiang country and kill Xian, then my Kuraki Academy will reward you handsomely in the future. Zhu Xiaotian remained silent for a long time. In the end he gritted his teeth and said, Let's do it. The white-robed old man nodded and vanished from within the hall. Great Cloud Realm Kuraki Academy. Before Righteous Hall. The white-robed old man gazed silently at the leaf sword above Righteous Hall. The dean of Kuraki Academy, Mu Qingxian, was standing behind the white-robed old man. Mu Qingxian hesitated for a moment before he said, That's truly too risky. Why don't we stop? The white-robed old man shook his head. We can't stop. The dean of Tsonglan Academy is dead, so that young man won't let us off. With that young man's natural talent, he'll probably become a sword immortal in the future. Kneel and apologize to him? My Kuraki Academy would rather die standing than kneel and live. Since she said that we can't bully the weak, then let's change the method. Mu Qingxian sighed softly. I'll go to Great Cloud Empire to seek an audience with that King Kaoshan. Since we're going to do it, let's do it to the extreme. The white-robed old man nodded. Do it to the extreme. One day later, 60,000 silver-armored cavalry of the Chu Kingdom suddenly headed north. 120,000 spear infantry of the Yu Kingdom suddenly gathered. At the same time outside Two Realm City, 100,000 black-armored cavalry arrived. In the Ning Kingdom's imperial palace, Tuoba Yen expressionlessly looked at the Great Cloud Granary wood token in front of her. Not far from her stood a black-robed man. Chapter 123. As soon as Tuoba Yan's voice faded, a dozen heavily armored guards wearing grimacing masks appeared in the hall. These people all held broadswords in their hands, and their bodies exuded an extremely sharp murderous aura. In front of Tuoba Yen, the black-robed man crossed his arms and said indifferently, King Tuoba, have you thought it through? Tuoba Yen leaned back on the dragon throne and said indifferently, Scram. The black-robed man nodded slightly, bear the consequences. With that he turned and disappeared on the spot. At this moment an old man and an old woman appeared behind Tuoba Yen. The old man said in a deep voice, Your Majesty, this will offend Great Cloud Kuraki College. Tuoba Yen said indifferently, If I do as they say and send troops to Jiang State, where will our soldiers and citizens be? The lives of their Kuraki College students are valuable, but the lives of our soldiers are not? They want our soldiers to risk their lives for them? In their dreams. The old man smiled bitterly, I'm afraid they won't let this go. Tuoba Yen slowly closed his eyes. Contact the old lord. We still need someone to intimidate these shameless old men. The old man's expression turned stern and he nodded, Okay. With that he turned and left. Tuoba Fu, a legendary figure of Ning country. The old woman walked to Tuoba Yen and said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, Great Cloud Empire is corrupt and King Kaoshan covers the sky with one hand. This old woman feels that Qingzhou's territory won't be peaceful for long. Your Majesty, please make plans early." Tuoba Yen nodded slightly. "Our country is already making preparations and can face anything at any time." She stood up as she spoke and then she walked over to the entrance of the hall. She looked towards the horizon while a trace of worry could be seen in her eyes. These foreign powers are interfering in the conflicts of the mortal world. The lives of the commoners are truly as lowly as ants in their eyes. The old woman lowered her head slightly and remained silent. A moment later, Tuoba Yen suddenly said, "Keep an eye on Jiang's state." The old woman nodded and turned to leave. Jiang's state. The sudden attack of several countries instantly caused the entire country to boil. 3 countries were attacking. In an instant, Jiang's state was attacked from all sides. It would be a lie to say that it was not panicking. In Jiang State's palace, the main hall was already in an uproar. The ministers spoke one after another, making the entire hall livelier than a street market. On the dragon throne, Jiang Yuan was expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. After an unknown period of time, the atmosphere in the great hall suddenly turned silent. An old man stood out and bowed to Jiang Yuan. "Your Majesty, the invasion of the Chu country and the other countries this time around clearly isn't just targeting our Jiang country." Jiang Yuan glanced at the old man. "Dear Minister Li, you want us to kidnap State Scholar Yi and send him to Chu to apologize?" The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Your Majesty, the country is more important than the people." Jiang Yuan said lightly, "The country is important, but if there are no people, how can there be a country? Furthermore, Yi Xian is a kingdom scholar of our Jiang country. If we were to send him to Chu country to apologize, it would be a humiliation to our country." As he spoke, he looked around. Does anyone have a different opinion? At this time, a white-haired old man suddenly stood out. The old man had a tall and sturdy figure. Although his hair was already white, his eyes were bright and full of expression and they were extremely fierce. He was the most renowned marshal Lin Shao of the Jiang country, and he was the one who'd brought up Jiang Jiao. Lin Shao said coldly, "The other old men might not know, but this old man only knows that that kid called Yi Xian once dared to resist 3,000 Tang Empire's black armored cavalrymen in Two World City. If our Jiang country were to sacrifice such a patriotic person to seek peace, then who would dare to love our Jiang country in the future? Fight for the Jiang country?" As he spoke, he waved his hand. "Old man, I only have one word. If they want to fight, then fight. Fight." The surroundings instantly fell silent. No one dared to refute the words of this person, and even Jiang Yuan had to be polite to him. After all, Jiang Yuan had been reprimanded by him in the past. Lin Shao and Jiang Yuetian were true brothers that had gone through life and death together. Jiang Yuan remained silent for a moment before he said, "If we fight, then how many troops do we have?" Lin Shao pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "My country has around 250,000 troops. 50,000 of them can't be mobilized, and the remaining 50,000 must be left to deter the country. In the face of national calamity, there will definitely be some monstrous traitors causing trouble. Half of the remaining 200,000 are in Two World City, and the old man will personally lead 100,000 troops to fight the Chu country and Yu country." Jiang Yuan shook his head. "That's not enough. The Chu country and Yu country had at least 200,000 troops in total, and the gap between 100,000 and 200,000 was quite huge." Lin Shao pondered deeply and said, "It's fine. Chu is quite far from our country, so their combat strength will definitely be greatly reduced if they travel a long distance. Compared to the Yu country's infantry really can't be underestimated. However, our Jiang country's soldiers aren't to be trifled with." "What about the Ning country?" Right at this moment, someone within the hall questioned, "Marshal Lin, what should we do if the Ning country suddenly attacks?" The Ning country. The hall fell silent in an instant. The strongest country in the surroundings hadn't made a stand yet. If the Ning country attacked the Jiang country as well, then it would truly be a calamity for the Jiang country. Not to mention an alliance, even if the Ning country attacked, it would be very difficult for the Jiang country to resist. In the hall, after a long silence, Zhang Yuan suddenly said, "I'll send someone to the Ning country. I'll go." Right at this moment, a voice suddenly came from not far away. Everyone looked over and saw that the person who had come was Yi Xian. Yi Xian. He naturally knew that such a big thing had happened in the country of Jiang, and he also had to take some responsibility for the current situation. This was because he had found out from the Drunken Immortal restaurant that the ones behind these countries should be the Great Cloud Granary Academy, and the Dark World definitely had some as well. Yi Xian walked into the hall and said, "I'll make a trip to the Ning country." Right now, the biggest threat to the Jiang country was the Ning country, and he didn't forget that he was also a kingdom scholar of the Ning country. If he went to the Ning country, it would definitely be more useful than others. Zhang Yuan hesitated for a moment and said, "The Ning country's attitude is unclear. I'm afraid that you'll go." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. I still have the ability to protect myself. Moreover, the Ning country won't be stupid enough to besiege and kill me. If they really do that, then they'll be attracting hatred." Zhang Yuan thought for a moment and nodded. "All right." Yi Xian nodded and turned to leave. Zhang Yuan suddenly said, "Court dismissed." With that, he turned and left. There was still a lot of discussion in the hall. Zhang Yuan arrived at a mental cultivation hall. Within the hall, Jiang Yuetian sat on the ground and was playing with a black puppy. Jiang Yuan said in a low voice, "The Jiang country is currently in a terrible situation." Jiang Yuetian said indifferently, "Our country and the Great Tang country have accumulated enmity for a long time. War is unavoidable. As for the Yu country and the Chu country, they're just pawns of the Diyun Songmu College. Of course, they can't be underestimated." Jiang Yuan said in a low voice, "I'm worried about the Diyun Songmu College behind them." Jiang Yuan was silent for a long time and then he said, "It doesn't matter. They won't dare to send out a Dharma realm expert. Not to mention the Tao protector, just the person behind little Yi is enough to deter them." As he spoke, he slowly stood up and walked to the door. He looked up at the sky and said softly, "For the Jiang country, this is a great crisis. Of course, it's also an opportunity. Now, it depends on the attitude of the Ning country." Ning country. The most powerful country in the surrounding region. No country isn't afraid of it. Most importantly, no one knew how powerful the Ning kingdom had become. Songlan Academy. After Yi Xian gave some instructions, he headed to the Ning country. This time he went by himself. Because he didn't bring anyone with him. After all, he was going there to discuss business, not to fight. Now that the Songlan Academy was on the right track, Mo Yunqi and the other two were enough to guard it. On the cloud ship, Yi Xian took out a token. The token in his hand was the token given to him by Tuoba Fu, Ning country's kingdom knight. Actually, he wasn't used to this identity. After all, he was from the Jiang country and he didn't seem to have any relationship with the Ning country. But it was good. With this identity, he should be able to have a good talk with the Ning country. As if he had thought of something, he circulated the Xianxia in his body and poured it into the token. Soon the token trembled slightly. Then a mysterious force suddenly surged into his arm. In an instant, his entire arm swelled up. At this moment, he felt his right hand was filled with an extremely overbearing force, as if he had mobilized the power of the earth. However, at this moment, the profound energy in his body was almost completely sucked out in an instant. The exquisite spirit sword instantly trembled to express its dissatisfaction. Yi Xian hurriedly stopped, and when he stopped, the force in his arm disappeared as well. Yi Xian was slightly shocked. He didn't expect the token to be so terrifying. He had overlooked it before. This was a treasure. Yi Xian was slightly excited. In the future, when he faced enemies, this equipment would be of great help. He could study it properly. But it was a pity that the consumption of Xianqi was too terrifying. Who knew how many spirit stones it would consume once it was activated? Use it with caution. After becoming the Dean, money was getting more and more scarce. Inside the cloud ship, Yi Xian returned to the prison pagoda and continued to cultivate. As long as he had time, he wouldn't relax for a moment. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. 2 days later, the Ning country arrived. As soon as the cloud ship stopped, Yi Xian jumped off the cloud ship and went straight to the Ning country's palace. This time he came on behalf of the Jiang country. Hence, the moment he entered the city, the Jiang country's envoy came to welcome him. He was a skinny old man. When the old man saw Yi Xian, he hurriedly went over and bowed respectfully. Greetings, State Scholar Yi. State Scholar Yi, I have already prepared a banquet. Please, State Scholar Yi. Yi Xian shook his head and interrupted the skinny old man. Bring me directly to the Ning country's palace. Business is more important. The skinny old man didn't dare to say anything else. He hurriedly nodded and brought Yi Xian to the Ning country's palace. In front of the Ning country's palace hall, Yi Xian and the skinny old man waited for almost an hour, but no one came out to summon them. Yi Xian felt that something was wrong. He turned to the skinny old man beside him. The old man was sweating profusely. This subordinate also doesn't know why. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Just as he was about to take out the token to force his way in, a woman suddenly walked over from afar. The woman wore a light yellow dress. Her hair fell over her shoulders and her figure was curvaceous. She was very alluring. When he saw the woman, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. Why is it you? The woman in front of him was the black-robed woman who had been intimate with him in the forest. Zhou Xian walked in front of Yi Xian with an expressionless face. Yi Xian hurriedly calmed himself down. He said sternly, "This is the Ning country's palace. I have a deep friendship with the king of Ning. I advise you not to act recklessly. Otherwise, do you understand?" Chapter 124. Zhou Xian looked at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. The skinny old man beside Yi Xian naturally recognized Zhou Xian. When he saw that Yi Xian did not recognize Zhou Xian, he was about to introduce him. But right at this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly said indifferently, "Let him continue performing." The skinny old man was speechless. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What do you want?" He was already secretly on guard. He knew very well the strength of this man or woman in front of him, so he could not be careless in the slightest. Zhou Xian said indifferently, "What do I want? What do you think I should do?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then he said, "What happened in the past?" Right at this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly attacked. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian punched out. Boom. Accompanied by an explosion, Yi Xian was blasted back dozens of feet. The nearby skinny old man was stunned when he saw this scene. They're fighting? What the hell is going on? Zhou Xian glanced at the skinny old man. Leave. The skinny old man naturally did not dare to disobey, and he hurriedly turned and left. As for Yi Xian, he could not be bothered with him. Fighting as soon as he arrived, there was something wrong with that. Zhou Xian looked at Yi Xian. "Not bad, your strength has improved a lot in such a short time." Yi Xian swung his fist. "Woman, you were the one who wanted to harm me first. Are you going to be reasonable?" Zhou Xian sneered. "Reason? The one with the bigger fist is the reason. Isn't that right?" Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a fist blasted towards Zhou Xian's face with a burst of air. Zhou Xian sneered, spun his palm slightly and then pressed it forward. Whoosh! A powerful bolt of lightning shook out from her palm. Boom! Yi Xian was blasted back 50 to 60 feet by this powerful force, and electric currents were running around his arm. Besides that, his entire hand was slightly numb. Across from Yi Xian, Zhou Xian said indifferently, "That's it." Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! The ground beneath his feet cracked and he appeared in front of Zhou Xian, also throwing a punch. But this time the punch was mixed with fist force and battle will. Smite was unparalleled. Zhou Xian's face was expressionless as she stretched her hand forward. In an instant her entire right hand trembled violently. Then, countless electric currents wrapped around Yi Xian's fist like a net. Whoosh! Countless sparks flew in all directions. The electric currents in Zhou Xian's hand resisted Yi Xian's fist, and his fighting spirit and fist momentum were gradually devoured by the electric currents. Not only that, but the electric currents also began to spread around his body. Yi Xian was shocked and wanted to retreat. However, Zhou Xian pressed forward and grabbed Yi Xian's fist. After that, Zhou Xian raised his leg and kicked towards Yi Xian's crotch. If that kick hit, then Yi Xian's bloodline would really end. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! A powerful strand of sword intent suddenly swept out from within him. As soon as it appeared, the electric currents around him were instantly shattered. Then Yi Xian suddenly twisted his right hand forward. Bang! Tuoba Yen was forced to take a few steps back from the impact, and her fatal kick naturally missed. As soon as Tuoba Yen stopped moving, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and blasted another punch at Tuoba Yen. "I'll smash your head with one punch." This time he was using his true power. Because he noticed that the woman before him was extraordinarily strong, and underestimating her in the slightest was no different than courting death. At this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in Tuoba Yan's eyes. Yi Xian's punch wasn't simple at all. She didn't dare act carelessly and she slowly clenched her right hand. In an instant her fist was covered by a strand of electric currents. At the same time, countless electric currents spread forward from beneath her feet. Meanwhile Yi Xian's fist arrived before her. Tuoba Yan's eyes narrowed slightly as he smashed his fist forward. It was a head-on collision. Bang! As soon as they collided, countless bolts of lightning shot madly towards the surroundings. Yi Xian was blasted over 30 m back once more, and some parts of his right arm were charred black. Even though Tuoba Yen had retreated as well, he'd only retreated by less than 6 m. There was no doubt that Yi Xian was at a disadvantage once more in this collision. Yi Xian shook his slightly numb arm, and then his brows knit together because something was slightly unusual. They'd fought for so long, yet not a single person had appeared. Something's off. Yi Xian gazed at Tuoba Yen. "You're no ordinary person." Tuoba Yan's face was expressionless. "Draw your sword." "Draw your sword." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "A day as husband and wife means a lifetime of love. That isn't really a good idea, right? Why don't we sit down and talk about it?" Right at this moment Tuoba Yen suddenly vanished on the spot. In an instant, a bolt of lightning flashed. This bolt of lightning carried the might of the heavens and the earth, and it was extremely powerful. Everywhere it passed, the ground was instantly transformed into ash, and it was an extremely shocking sight. Yi Xian was horrified when he sensed this scene. This time he really didn't dare hold back at all. The spirit beauty sword appeared soundlessly in his grasp, and then a ray of light flashed. Sword intent and battle intent. Two types of intents had been condensed and there was even sword force behind it. Even though this attack wasn't one that could decide life and death with a single strike, it was still extremely terrifying. Everywhere Yi Xian passed, the ground started to crack apart inch by inch. In next to no time the ray of light and the bolt of lightning collided. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded. In the blink of an eye, two figures were blasted back repeatedly, and they'd moved over 100 m back. On the other hand, the ground before them was in a mess. The spirit beauty sword in Yi Xian's hand was trembling violently while rays of light flickered incessantly on it. On the other hand, Tuoba Yan's face was expressionless as he gazed coldly at Yi Xian. Right at this moment, a group of soldiers suddenly surrounded them from all directions. Yi Xian walked over to Tuoba Yan and said, "You're finished." As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew the command token. The Kingdom's Scholar token. When they saw the command token, the soldiers in the surroundings were stunned for a moment before they knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Kingdom's Scholar." A Kingdom's Scholar. Such a status was extremely high, or it should be said that it was merely inferior to the king. Yi Xian nodded with satisfaction and then he waved his hand, "Capture her." The soldiers instantly revealed strange expressions when they heard this. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he waved the command token in his hand. "Is this useless?" All of them were speechless. At this moment Tuoba Yen suddenly waved his hand, and the soldiers instantly retreated. They retreated very quickly and vanished in the blink of an eye. "Yi Xian." Tuoba Yen walked over to Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. "The speed at which your strength is growing is slightly abnormal." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Who are you?" Tuoba Yen sneered, "What do you think?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He wasn't stupid. At this moment he had already guessed the identity of the woman before him. He didn't know the name of the King of Ning, but he knew that the King of Ning was a woman. There was no doubt that it was this woman before him. Tuoba Yen. Yi Xian's expression was rather complicated. This woman was actually the King of Ning. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. "You can go back now." With that she turned around and left. Yi Xian thought for a while then hurriedly followed. At this moment Tuoba Yen suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. "What's wrong?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice. This time I came on behalf of the state of Jiang. Tuoba Yen said coldly, "Don't worry. My Ning country will not send troops to the state of Jiang. My Ning country will not participate in this matter." Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart suddenly relaxed. As if thinking of something, he said again, "Do you want to do something big?" Tuoba Yen said lightly, "You want my Ning country to form an alliance with the state of Jiang to help your state of Jiang resist the disaster?" Yi Xian shook his head. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "My idea is that the attack of the Tang Empire and other countries is a challenge for my state of Jiang, but it is also an opportunity. You should understand what I mean." Tuoba Yen looked straight at Yi Xian. "I will not let the Ning country get involved in the war." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." With that he turned around and left. Right at this moment Tuoba Yen suddenly appeared in front of him. There is a mercenary group in the surrounding area. There are only 12 people and all of them are peak Nether Passage realm experts. If you have the money you can ask them to come out and lend you a hand. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "How much does it cost to ask them?" Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "At least 100 million gold coins." The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. 100 million gold coins. That's too fucking expensive. I can't afford it. At this moment Tuoba Yen said, "But it's absolutely worth it. Most importantly, don't let them be invited by the Tang Empire. Otherwise you'll have a headache." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I have no money." Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. "You can borrow it." "Borrow?" Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, "Borrow from who?" Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "It's not impossible to borrow from me, but I need something as collateral." When she spoke up to this point she sized up Yi Xian. "That treasure that can absorb the energy of the earth should be in your possession, right?" The energy of the earth. Dao laws. Yi Xian instantly became vigilant in his heart. This woman is actually targeting the Dao laws. No way. Yi Xian said indifferently, "I don't know what you're talking about. Since the Ning Empire isn't going to fight, then I'll be taking my leave." With that he turned around and left. Tuoba Yen suddenly looked coldly at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. At this moment an old man and an old woman appeared behind Tuoba Yen, and the old man said in a low voice, "Those people are making a big move but I don't know what it is." In short, the Jiang Empire will definitely suffer heavy losses this time. Tuoba Yen slowly closed his eyes. "Send all our scouts out and grasp all the information in the surroundings at all times." The old man nodded, "Understood." With that he turned around and left. At this moment Yi Xian, who had already left, suddenly walked back. Tuoba Yen was stunned. Yi Xian walked up to Tuoba Yen, hesitated for a moment and then said softly, You're not pregnant, right?" Tuoba Yen was speechless. Chapter 125. Tuoba Yen suddenly vanished on the spot. Bam! A figure was directly sent flying. This time he flew more than 100 feet away. It was none other than Yi Xian. Over 100 feet away Yi Xian crashed heavily to the ground, creating a deep pit. Tuoba Yan's face was livid and he was about to attack again when Yi Xian got up and ran. He was very fast and disappeared into the distance in an instant. Looking at Yi Xian, who was running faster than a rabbit, Tuoba Yen suddenly smiled. He laughed out of anger. Pregnant? She was naturally very concerned about this matter. In fact, she was not pregnant. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly ran back. Tuoba Yan's smile instantly turned cold. Yi Xian kept a distance from Tuoba Yen. He rubbed his slightly stuffy chest and said, "I will become a sword immortal." Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "What does that have to do with me?" Yi Xian said seriously, "If I become a sword immortal, then you will be the one who slept with a sword immortal, right?" Tuoba Yan's eyelids twitched. "Do you have a death wish?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Am I not?" Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian for a while and said, "Sword immortal? I don't know if you will become a sword immortal, but I do know that you will definitely become a cheap immortal." Yi Xian. Tuoba Yen did not say anything else and turned to leave. But soon she stopped again. "There's no point in being a sword immortal. He's a man with integrity and loyalty. Even if he isn't a sword immortal, I will still respect him." With that she quickly disappeared into the distance. On the spot Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before turning to leave. After receiving Tuoba Yan's accurate reply, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. If the state of Ning did not make a move, then the state of Jiang was not in a hopeless situation. In front of the city gates, Yi Xian looked up into the distance. This time these countries were not only targeting the state of Jiang, but also him and Azure Billow Academy. He knew very well that Kuraki Academy and Dark World didn't want him to grow. Fortunately, the other party should not dare to send a powerhouse above the Dharma realm. Even so, he did not dare to be careless. The battle with Tuoba Yen made him understand that there were powerful existences in the divine combination stage. He did not use his full strength earlier, and neither did Tuoba Yen. If they were to fight to the death, he was not confident that he could defeat Tuoba Yen. Of course, he wasn't afraid. Collecting his thoughts, he was just about to leave when a hunchbacked old man suddenly pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and slashed at his abdomen. Quick! It was extremely fast, like a venomous snake striking, making it hard for anyone to react. At this moment Yi Xian could not dodge at all, and he did not dodge either. The moment the old man's knife cut into his abdomen, he punched both sides of the old man's head. Bang! The old man's head instantly exploded. Yi Xian took a few steps back. There was a wound on his abdomen and blood was flowing out. At this moment, several cold glints silently appeared at his throat. The back of his neck, his lower body, and his thighs. Every cold glint was aimed at his vitals. There was no way to retreat. Yi Xian did not intend to retreat either. He opened his right hand and the spirit elegant sword appeared. The next moment he swung the sword. The sound of the sword resonated. Boom! The cold glints shattered and several blurry figures appeared dozens of feet away from Yi Xian. These blurry figures did not attack again, and instead turned and disappeared not far away. They fled immediately after the first attack failed. Yi Xian did not give chase because the other party was too fast and had concealed their auras. He could not catch up at all. Assassins. Yi Xian's expression was extremely gloomy. Needless to say, these were definitely assassins from Dark World. These assassins were extremely professional and ruthless. They fled immediately after the first attack failed. If these assassins targeted the country of Zhang's soldiers or Azure Billow Academy students, it would definitely be a disaster. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian turned and entered the city. About a quarter of an hour later, he left the city again and headed straight out of the city. In the boundless mountain range, Yi Xian sprinted all the way. Soon he arrived at a pavilion. A man was lying in the pavilion. The man had his legs crossed and was holding two pitch-black iron balls in his hands. Yi Xian walked into the pavilion. The man glanced at Yi Xian. Blind. At this moment, a powerful sword intent and sword force suddenly enveloped the man. In an instant the entire pavilion cracked. The man squinted his eyes. Sword Dao Grandmaster. Yi Xian sat at the side. Let's talk business. The man said indifferently, do you know our rules? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. As he spoke he took out a black card. Seeing this black card, the man could not help but look at Yi Xian. This black card was the highest level card in Drunken Immortal Inn. In other words, it was a status symbol. After a moment of silence, the man stood up. Follow me. Yi Xian followed the man and walked into the distance. Under the man's guidance, the two of them passed through a huge mountain and came to the belly of the mountain. In the belly of the mountain, there were dozens of houses scattered. It looked like a small village. However, the village was very quiet and there was not a single person in it. The man brought Yi Xian to a well. At this moment, a woman was fetching water. She was about 20 years old. She wore a linen shirt and tight linen pants. There was a linen rope tied around her waist. She did not wear shoes and was barefooted. The man said respectfully, "Big sister, we have business." The woman turned around and looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian also saw the woman's appearance through his sword eyes. She was not considered beautiful, but she was very pleasing to the eye. The woman put down the bucket and sat on a rock on the ground. What business? Yi Xian said, protecting people. The woman shook her head. We only kill people. Yi Xian said, there's no difference. The woman raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Protecting people is harder than killing people. Yi Xian was silent. After a moment, the woman suddenly said, of course, there's nothing that money can't solve. Increase the price at 80 million gold coins. If you agree, we can talk again. Yi Xian said, sure. The woman took out a large flatbread and took a bite. Who's the opponent? Yi Xian said, Great Cloud Realm, Dark World, Kuraki Academy. The woman was expressionless. Double the price. Xian nodded. No problem. The woman continued to take a bite of the flatbread. How many days? How many people? Xian thought for a moment and said, how about this? Let's not talk about this nonsense. I'll give you 200 million. Your time for a month is mine. During this month, if I ask you to protect people, you will protect them. If I ask you to kill people, you will kill people. How about it? The woman glanced at Xian. Half a month. Xian shook his head. For a month, I'll give you an Earth rank martial technique. Earth rank martial technique. The woman went silent. Xian didn't speak either. The scene suddenly became silent. After a long time, the woman spoke. Sure. Xian nodded. Now I want to see your strength. The woman glanced at Xian. You don't believe us? Xian shook his head. I just want to see. It's not too much to pay such a huge price, right? The woman looked at the man beside Xian. The man nodded slightly. In the next moment he suddenly vanished. At this moment Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. One sword determines life and death. This sword directly utilized one sword determines life and death. Moreover, it contained sword intent and sword force. Bang! As soon as Xian's sword slashed down, the man was instantly blasted against a wall that was over 30 m away. The wall collapsed and buried the man. But it didn't take long for the man to climb out. But at this moment, blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. Xian pointed his sword at the ground and he looked at the woman. That's it. The woman looked at Xian with an expressionless face. Is a grandmaster in the sword Dao very powerful? Xian was about to speak. Suddenly, a figure charged at him from behind. Xian's eyes narrowed. He stabbed his sword into the ground and then he turned around and punched. I'll smash your head with a single punch. Bang! An explosion suddenly rang out. In an instant Xian retreated more than 10 steps. In front of him a bald man was still retreating continuously. This time he retreated more than 100 feet. The bald man stared fixedly at Xian. At this moment his right hand was trembling violently. Xian turned around to face the woman. That's it. The woman took a bite of the flatbread and said, a grandmaster in the martial Dao and the sword Dao. She nodded as she spoke and then she put the flatbread away. Right at this moment, a man suddenly walked over from the side. Big sister, why do you need to deal with him? Xian turned around and saw a man walking towards him. The man's upper body was bare and he held a spear in his right hand. The spear was very heavy and he couldn't hold it completely. When he arrived before Xian, he didn't waste his breath and just stabbed with his spear. This spear strike was extremely domineering. Spear energy. Spear intent. Moreover, the man was at the Nether Passage realm. A true expert has arrived. Xian pulled his sword out from the ground and slashed forward swiftly. This strike was still a strike to decide life and death. Moreover, it contained sword intent and battle intent. Two types of intents. His sword slashed down. Bang! The spear in the man's hand shook violently. In the next moment he was blasted over 30 m away along with his spear. As soon as he stopped, the ground beneath his feet instantly cracked open. The man stared fixedly at Xian. A dual cultivator of the sword and martial arts. Xian didn't return to the man with the spear, and he faced the nearby woman in a cotton dress instead. I'm sorry. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but all of you aren't worth this price. As soon as he finished speaking, he sheathed his sword, turned around and left. The people he fought weren't weak at all and they should be said to be very strong. However, they weren't worth that much. He was willing to spend money, but he wouldn't spend it recklessly. Every few steps Xian took, the woman behind him would suddenly vanish on the spot. In the next moment he turned around and slashed with his sword. He didn't underestimate her and it was still a full-force strike. However, this strike suddenly stopped in midair because the woman's finger had suddenly pressed against his armpit. In an instant, a wave of intense pain spread throughout his entire body. Moreover, this was only the beginning. The woman's finger suddenly transformed into a palm, and it slapped towards his throat at an extremely swift speed. Xian tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and was just about to retreat. However, the woman's bare foot had suddenly stepped on the back of his right foot. This stomp forcefully stopped him from retreating. At the same time, the woman's palm struck his throat. Bang! Yi Xian retreated by over 30 m, and every single step he took caused the ground to crack apart. The woman didn't continue attacking. She glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Dual cultivator of the body, martial and sword." Yi Xian was just about to speak when an afterimage suddenly flashed over from afar. It was extremely swift and it instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. After that, countless afterimages enveloped Yi Xian. Bang, 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 bang. Muffled sounds resounded incessantly, and every single muffled sound would cause Yi Xian to retreat repeatedly. After a few breaths of time, Yi Xian had already retreated by over 60 m. At the moment he stopped, the person before him had vanished, and a charming man had suddenly appeared behind the woman in the distance. The man was extremely thin and he could be described as thin as a match. However, his gaze was extremely sharp. On the spot where he stood, Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth. He looked at the woman and the others in the distance, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. These people are all geniuses. If they're able to join Songlong Academy. When he thought up to here, he suddenly opened his right hand, and the spirit elegant sword vanished and was replaced by the grand black sword. In the next moment, the entire ground suddenly trembled violently. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying force of the earth instantly converged within his body. Chapter 126. Recruitment. At this moment, Yi Xian had the intention to recruit them. However, he knew very well that if he wanted to recruit these people, then he had to beat them into submission. Only then would he have a chance. The strong were respected. So he directly exposed his trump card, the energy of the earth. As the energy of the earth flowed ceaselessly into his body, he slowly raised the big black sword with both hands. At this moment, a powerful sword aura suddenly swept out from within Yi Xian's body, and this aura instantly enveloped the woman and the others. Sword aura. At this moment his sword aura had practically reached its peak. Crack. The houses and ground in the surroundings started to crack inch by inch. The expressions of the woman and the others became even more solemn. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward with the big black sword in his hand. One strike to decide life and death. These people before him weren't ordinary people, so he didn't dare to hold back at all. He immediately executed his strongest attack. At the moment Yi Xian attacked, the woman's eyes narrowed slightly. She took half a step back with her right foot, and the tip of her foot tapped lightly on the ground. At the same time she formed a seal with both hands. In an instant, a terrifying aura suddenly condensed around her, and at this moment her entire body actually seemed to become slightly illusory. At the moment Yi Xian's heavy sword arrived, the woman lightly tapped the ground with her right foot, and then she pressed the fingers of her right hand together and tapped forward. This tap was directly on Yi Xian's big black sword. Bang! The large black sword was forcefully stopped. However, two peerlessly formidable forces swept out like a storm. Besides Yi Xian and the woman, everyone else in the surroundings were shaken to the point of retreating explosively by over 30 meters. On the other hand, all the houses within 50 meters instantly collapsed at this moment. Moreover, the ground beneath their feet started to crack layer by layer at this moment. It was an extremely shocking sight. However, Yi Xian and the woman didn't move at all. After a short moment, the woman stopped and took a step back. When her foot touched the ground, the entire ground actually trembled violently as if there was a huge earthquake. Yi Xian put the big black sword away with a rather solemn expression. "You've neutralized the energy of my sword." Dispersing the force. Not only did the woman in front of him block his sword, but she also negated most of the power of his sword. This was extremely terrifying. The cloth-clothed woman glanced at Yi Xian. "You're very strong, but we're not weak either. Deal or not?" Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, "I'll do it. However, I can only give you 100 million for now. I'll pay the rest when the time comes. Is that all right with you?" The cloth-clothed woman shook her head. "I want everything." Yi Xian shook his head. "Oh." The clothed woman said indifferently, "Then there's nothing to talk about." Yi Xian chuckled. "Forgive me for being blunt, but how much can you earn by being a mercenary?" The woman in the cotton shirt and the others looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian pointed at himself. "You've heard of me, right?" The cloth-robed woman shook her head. "Never heard of it." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. Why wasn't this woman in character? He coughed lightly and then said, the state of Zhang's Kuraki Academy was destroyed. You should have heard of it, right? The cloth-robed woman glanced at Zhou Xian. What are you trying to say? Zhou Xian said sternly, if I'm not mistaken, you guys rarely open a card because the price you ask for is very expensive. Moreover, with this amount of wealth, most of the time, you can already invite a powerhouse at the peak of the 10,000 techniques realm. At this point he paused for a moment and then said, do you want to do something big? The cloth-robed woman sat at the side. She took out a large flatbread and took a bite. Then she took out a green onion. Zhou Xian's expression was somewhat unnatural. Why was this woman the same as Fudiji? Why did they both like to eat so much? After a moment the cloth-robed woman said, tell me about it. Zhou Xian walked over to the cloth-robed woman and sat down. He drew a large circle on the ground and then said, several countries have come to attack my state of Jiang. To my state of Jiang, this is a crisis, but it is also an opportunity. If you're willing, then you can follow me and do something big. The cloth-robed woman took a bite of the green onion, and then she looked at Zhou Xian. How? Zhou Xian said in a low voice, rob them. Rob them of their money. Everyone here glanced at each other when they heard this. Rob a country? I've never done such a thing before. The cloth-robed woman gazed at Zhou Xian and didn't speak. Zhou Xian said, rob the Tang Empire first, then rob their military supplies, pay and treasury. Do you dare? Meanwhile, the spear-wielding man suddenly said, danger. Zhou Xian said indifferently, we're all on the edge of a knife, so what's there to be afraid of? Do you dare? If you do, then we'll go all out. If you don't, then it's fine. I'll pay you and you'll follow me. However, you won't get a share of the things we rob. So you can choose to pay in one go or you can split it. At this moment the surrounding people gathered around and started to discuss. Some agreed, some disagreed, and some even felt that Zhou Xian was a scammer and wasn't reliable. After an unknown amount of time, the cloth-robed woman suddenly waved her hand, and the surrounding people immediately quieted down. The cloth-robed woman looked at Zhou Xian. How can I believe you? Zhou Xian stood up. If you believe me, I won't say anything and you'll still believe me. If you don't believe me, then you won't believe me no matter what I say, right? The cloth-robed woman looked at Zhou Xian for a long time and finally she also stood up. How do we split the things we rob? Zhou Xian said, 50-50. The spear-wielding man said coldly, you alone want to take 50%? Zhou Xian faced the spear-wielding man. If I meet an enemy, I'll fight the strongest one. The spear-wielding man's mouth twitched. He glanced at Zhou Xian, but in the end he didn't say anything, because the guy in front of him was really strong. The cloth-robed woman suddenly said, 50-50, we can do it. However, if the profit is small or if I don't think you're worth the price, we'll withdraw at any time. Zhou Xian stretched out his right hand. Sure. The cloth-robed woman glanced at Zhou Xian, and then stretched out her right hand to hit Zhou Xian's palm. Zhou Xian said, how many people do you have? The cloth-robed woman whistled. After a few breaths, a few more people suddenly appeared on the scene. Zhou Xian counted a total of 12 people. Every one of them was in the Nether Passage realm. Moreover, almost every one of them was very young, around 20 years old. Zhou Xian's expression was quite solemn. These people were definitely not ordinary people. The cloth-robed woman looked at Zhou Xian. Now you're in command. Zhou Xian nodded. Let's go to Tang Kingdom. The cloth-robed woman whistled once more. In next to no time, the mountain village suddenly started trembling, and it wasn't long before over 10 black wolves that were the size of cows charged out. All of these black wolves had sharp and long fur and revealed ferocious gazes. Demon beast. Moreover, they were formidable demon beast. These wolves were existences at the Skyfall realm at least. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Demon beasts were extremely rare in the Jiang Kingdom. Who exactly are these people? The cloth-robed woman suddenly sat on a black wolf, and then she gazed at Zhou Xian. What about you? Zhou Xian thought for a moment and then he said, can you give me one? The cloth-robed woman glanced at Zhou Xian. In the end she whistled once more and it didn't take long for another wolf to charge over. This wolf directly arrived before Zhou Xian, and Zhou Xian didn't hold back at all. He leaped up and sat on the wolf's back. Zhou Xian waved his hand. Let's go to Tang Kingdom. As soon as he finished speaking, the black wolf beneath him leaped up and charged out. In next to no time, over 10 black wolves charged down the mountain and vanished into the boundless mountain range. Xian was slightly shocked, because the speed of these wolves was truly too swift. With their speed, it would take them half a day at most to arrive at Tang Kingdom. Two World City. At this moment, the city gates were closed tightly and the city walls were filled with soldiers. Moreover, the soldiers within the city were on standby as well. 3,000 zhang outside of Two World City was a black mass of cavalry. 100,000 black armored cavalry. The elite forces of Tang Kingdom. On the city walls, Xianxia wore silver armor and he seemed valiant and graceful. However, he seemed to be slightly exhausted. Beside Xianxia, a middle-aged man clad in heavy armor spoke in a low voice. Marshal, the Tang Empire should be waiting for the soldiers of the Chu Empire to arrive. Once the soldiers of the two countries arrive, they will immediately launch an attack. Xianxia nodded. Tell our brothers to listen up. Two World City can't be lost. If this place is breached, then the cavalry of Tang Kingdom won't have any obstructions, and they can march straight into the hinterland of Jiang Kingdom. At that time, the battlefield will be on the land of Jiang Kingdom and countless people will die because of the war. So this place can't be lost, not a single inch of land can be lost. The middle-aged man nodded. Understood. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Xianxia frowned slightly as he looked at the black mass of cavalry in the distance. Can you withstand the dark world of Kuraki Academy? After an unknown period of time, Xian's group passed through countless mountains and finally arrived at an ancient city. River City. The city was the city of the Tang Kingdom and it was the closest to Two World City. All the logistics of the Tang Kingdom soldiers were in this city, so it was heavily guarded. At this moment, the woman beside Xian suddenly said, there are 2,000 elites in the city, and among them, there are 6 Nether Passage realm powerhouses and more than 30 High Void realm powerhouses. Xian was stunned and then he said, how do you know? The woman didn't answer. She looked at River City and said, there are soldiers all around the city walls and the defense is tight. It's impossible to sneak in silently. As for the 13 of us, even if we sneak in, we won't be able to stop those 2,000 elites. Moreover, if a war breaks out here, the Tang Kingdom's army will immediately return to defend and we'll all die. As she spoke, she looked at Xian and asked, what should we do now? Xian said in a low voice, do you know where their provisions are? The woman raised her head and looked at the sky. A black eagle was circling above River City. After a while, the woman said in a low voice, in the military camp in the north of the city. There's a heavy defense there. Xian nodded and said, it's good that we know the exact location. The woman looked at Xian and asked, what should we do? Xian shook his head and said, we have no choice but to go head on. Everyone fell silent. Xian said, I'll attract the firepower. All of you charge into the military camp with all your strength. Take away the provisions and destroy them. Is that all right? The woman looked at Xian and said, you might die. Xian hesitated for a moment and said, why don't you go attract the firepower and I'll go steal? The woman and the others' faces darkened when they heard this. Damn it. That's too shameless. Xian chuckled and said, all of you hurry up and let me see your strength. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged out. The woman glanced at Xian and said indifferently, don't let the people of Qingzhou look down on us. Prepare to attack. Everyone gathered their strength and were ready to attack at any moment. In the distance, a strand of sword light suddenly blasted onto the city gate. Bang! The city gate was instantly split into two. Xian charged into the city, but he was surrounded by a group of soldiers as soon as he entered. Moreover, more and more soldiers were surrounding him. A wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of Xian's mouth when he saw the increasing number of soldiers. In the next moment he suddenly opened his eyes. I'll use my sword as my eyes. I'll only write 2 chapters today because I obtained the approval of the big shots yesterday. All the gods are gathered here today and I'm a newcomer, so I'm truly quite perturbed to attend the annual meeting. Besides that, some readers said that they wanted to see me at the annual meeting because I'm both male and female. Brothers, you can't go to Zongheng and say that. Chapter 127. Sword Eyes. The moment Xian opened his eyes, 2 rays of sword light shot out from his eyes like 2 bolts of lightning. In an instant, dozens of soldiers in front of him were shattered by these two rays of sword light. Directly shattered. The remaining 100 soldiers were seriously injured by these two rays of sword light. Yi Xian didn't stop, and instead charged forward with spirit elegant sword in hand. What he needed to do now was to delay for the cloth-robed woman and the others. Kill. Yi Xian charged forward with sword in hand, and wherever he passed, heads would fall to the ground. With Yi Xian's appearance, more and more soldiers rushed over from the city. Outside the city, the cloth-robed woman suddenly said, "Charge." As soon as she said that, the 12 of them rode their black wolves and charged out. Extremely fast, the 12 of them instantly charged into the city, heading straight for the military camp. Seeing this, the soldiers that surrounded Yi Xian suddenly reacted. One of the general's expression changed drastically and he shouted angrily, "Return to the camp. Return to the camp quickly." Very quickly, some of the soldiers retreated rapidly. However, their speed wasn't as fast as the cloth-robed woman and the others. In less than 10 breaths' time, the cloth-robed woman and the others had already rushed to the front of the military camp. And at this moment, there were already several hundred elite soldiers gathered in front of the military camp. Seeing these several hundred elite soldiers, the cloth-robed woman and the others' expressions became extremely serious. Although these soldiers didn't have as high a cultivation level as them, they definitely couldn't be underestimated. These soldiers had a murderous aura and there were many of them attacking and defending orderly. This kind of army was very difficult to deal with. And at this moment they had no way out. The cloth-robed woman suddenly turned to look at a man beside her. Ling Han. The man called Ling Han suddenly leaped into the air. In the air, Ling Han put his palms together, and in an instant, a scorching aura spread out in the air. The next moment his arms actually started burning. In the air, Ling Han's lips curled into a sinister smile. Exploding flame fall. As soon as he said that, he crashed down from the sky like a fireball towards the group of soldiers. Wherever Ling Han passed, the air was directly burned. At this moment he was as dazzling as a blazing sun. Earth-tier martial arts technique. Below, the soldiers' eyes were instantly filled with shock, but none of them retreated. At this moment, behind the group of soldiers, a general suddenly shouted angrily, "Raise your shields." Whoosh. Hundreds of soldiers raised their long shields. At this moment Ling Han crashed down. Boom. Dozens of soldiers were sent flying and countless flames sputtered. The formation that the group of soldiers had formed was immediately broken by half, and at this time the cloth-robed woman and the others directly rushed into the military camp. Soon, the woman arrived at a tent and the people behind her blocked her from entering. The woman glanced around. There were dozens of iron boxes and 3 golden boxes in the tent. The cloth-robed woman opened a metal chest. Inside it were all glittering gold coins. After a moment of silence, she quickly walked to the golden chests and opened one of them. Inside there was a long saber. A supreme-grade spirit artifact. The woman didn't look at it any longer and just closed the box. She twisted the ring on her index finger lightly with her thumb, and in the next moment all the boxes disappeared. The woman turned around and walked out of the tent. At this moment they were surrounded by soldiers and more soldiers were rushing over. The woman glanced at the soldiers. In the next moment she suddenly walked towards them and said, "Stick close to me and make a way out." As soon as she finished speaking, her speed suddenly increased. Hong. Some of the soldiers were sent flying before they could see the woman clearly. Just like that, under the lead of the woman they directly made a way out. Soon, the woman blew a whistle, and the black wolves that had retreated to the side came in front of the woman and the others again. The 12 of them jumped onto the wolves and directly rushed out of the city. When they rushed to the gate, Yi Xian was still fighting with a group of soldiers. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Let's go." Not far away, Yi Xian slashed out with his sword and the soldier in front of him was directly cut into 2. At the same time he tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot and directly leaped to the back of the cloth-wearing woman, and then he and the cloth-wearing woman sat on a black wolf. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the people behind the woman instantly changed. The woman also frowned slightly but didn't say anything. She directly rode on the black wolf and directly rushed into the distance. Soon the group of people directly rushed out of the city, but very soon, they stopped because there were about thousands of cavalry charging in their direction. "They've returned." The woman's beautiful brows knit together when she witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "We're entering the city from the other side." The woman spoke in a low voice, "Then we'll have to enter the Tang Empire's territory." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "We have no other choice." The woman didn't speak any further. She just lightly patted the black wolf beneath her, and then it turned around and dashed towards the city while the 12 of them followed closely behind her. At this moment, the soldiers behind them had already gotten into formation once more. A general pointed his sword at Yi Xian's group and roared furiously, "Stop them!" Kill. Countless soldiers charged at Yi Xian's group. Yi Xian suddenly flew forward. In the next moment, a sword flashed and then the heads of numerous soldiers flew into the air. On the other hand, the woman flew down as well. Just like that, the two of them joined forces and forcefully opened a bloody path through the group of soldiers. It didn't take long for all of them to vanish into the distance. The soldiers couldn't catch up to them at all. In next to no time, a group of cavalry arrived at the city, and a middle-aged man in armor led a group of cavalry into the city. The middle-aged man's face was livid when he saw the corpses all over the ground. This middle-aged man was the commander of the 100,000 black armored cavalry, Pei Xiaohu, and he was the most famous commander in the Tang Empire. Pei Xiaohu glanced at the surroundings and said coldly, "Immediately send someone to investigate the identities of these people and notify the king. Ask him to send the Black Blade Guards to help us. Also, immediately recall 30,000 cavalry and seal off the surrounding borders. We can't let them leave the Tang Empire." As he spoke, he raised his head and looked into the distance. "Send word to the Death Battalion. Tell them to chase after that group of people without rest." Yes. Behind him, numerous people turned around and left. Pei Xiaohu stared fixedly at the end of the street in the distance, and his face was terrifyingly gloomy. This time he hadn't just lost the army's provisions, he'd also lost some treasures that he'd collected. Most of these treasures were top-grade spiritual artifacts. Heavy losses. Actually, these things could be stored in storage rings, but it was too troublesome. Firstly, the storage ring itself was very expensive. Moreover, the ones that could be bought were those with very small space. If one wanted to store all those things, they would need to buy at least a few dozen storage rings. This in itself was a very large expenditure. It was not cost-effective. Apart from that, the storage ring was not safe either. After all, if a storage ring was placed on one person, what would happen to the army's provisions if something happened to that person? Moreover, the higher-ups wouldn't be at ease to put all these things on one person. They had to get them back. Pei Xiaohu slowly closed his eyes. If he couldn't get them back, the consequences would be very serious. However, he couldn't understand where the Jiang Empire had found these Nether Passage realm experts. Each and every one of them was so terrifying. Yi Xian and the others ran wildly all the way. About 4 hours later, they entered a dense forest and stopped. At this moment, everyone had more or less injuries on their bodies. Yi Xian's entire body was covered in injuries. This time he also witnessed the strength of the soldiers. These soldiers weren't strong individually, but when they worked together they were extremely terrifying. If he had been surrounded by those several thousand cavalrymen, he would have died even if he used the power of the earth. It could be said that in a battle between two armies, even a Divine Unity realm expert wouldn't be of much use. Everyone sat down in a circle and Yi Xian was also squeezed into the crowd. The woman in cotton robes glanced at Yi Xian, then she took out her storage ring. Soon dozens of boxes appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others. One of them opened a box which was filled with dazzling gold coins. Everyone's eyes instantly lit up. However, no greed appeared on their faces because they had all seen the world. The woman in cotton robes said, 38 metal boxes and each box is worth at least 2 million gold coins. The total is about 70 million gold coins. There are 3 golden boxes and there are 8 supreme-grade spirit artifacts. Each spirit artifact is worth about 5 million gold coins. Close to 100 million. Everyone's faces revealed a smile. The woman in cotton robes glanced at Yi Xian. Half is yours. Everyone also looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then shook his head. Let's split it evenly. Evenly. Everyone was stunned. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, everyone's contribution is the same, so I don't have the qualifications to take so much. Let's split it evenly according to the number of people. No one said anything, but when they looked at Yi Xian, their expressions became much gentler. The woman in cotton robes looked at Yi Xian. Are you serious? Yi Xian smiled. Swordsman never cheats. Swordsman. The woman in cotton robes nodded. She almost forgot that this person in front of her was a sword Dao grandmaster. After a moment of silence, the woman in cotton robes said, You attracted the firepower, so you should get more. You get 20 million gold coins and you get 3 supreme-grade spirit artifacts. How about it? Yi Xian nodded. No problem. Soon everyone finished dividing the loot. This time, everyone's harvest could be said to be a lot, especially 2 of them. They even got their own supreme-grade spirit artifacts. After everyone put away their things, the woman in cotton robes looked at Yi Xian. How about now? Everyone also looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, The Tang Empire's cavalry must be chasing us from behind. We can't go back, we can only go forward. The woman in cotton robes said in a deep voice, The Tang Empire might mobilize a 10,000 law stage powerhouse. Yi Xian said, Don't worry, they won't dare. The woman in cotton robes looked at Yi Xian. There's someone behind you. Yi Xian nodded. They won't dare to mobilize a 10,000 law stage powerhouse. But are you afraid of a divine combination powerhouse? The woman in cotton robes said indifferently, I've killed countless. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, Let me introduce myself. Qingzhou's Jiang Country, Azure Billow Academy's Dean Yi Xian. The woman in cotton robes withdrew a large flatbread, took a bite and then said, Central Divine Prefecture's Lu Clan Lu Banzwang. The man with a slightly ugly appearance by the woman's side glanced at Yi Xian. Central Divine Prefecture's Yi Clan Yi Li. Central Divine Prefecture's Azure Sect Ling Han. Central Divine Prefecture's Mo Clan Mou. Central Divine Prefecture's Southern Territory, Nan Kaming. Central Divine Prefecture's Holy Land, Gan Wuwei. Chapter 128. Yi Xian's face was emotionless, but he was quite shocked in his heart. Because this group of people were all from the Central Plains. Why had someone from the Central Divine Prefecture come here? Yi Xian was very puzzled. After all, the Central Divine Prefecture was very far away from here. As if she knew Yi Xian's puzzlement, the woman glanced at him and said, Tempering and wandering. No one is helping you from the shadows. Tempering. Wandering. Yi Xian instantly came to an understanding when he heard this. All of them had come out to temper themselves and they'd obviously come out on their own. They hadn't brought any experts with them. This was true tempering and wandering. If they brought an expert with them, then it wouldn't be tempering and wandering, it would be pretending to be weak to eat a tiger. Suddenly, the man called Yi Li who stood by the woman's side gazed at Yi Xian and said, You're the Dean of Azure Wave Academy? Yi Xian nodded. Yi Li had a rather strange expression on his face because Yi Xian was too young. The man who held a spear by Yi Li's side, Mo Yu, suddenly said, Your Azure Wave Academy is really amazing in the Central Divine Prefecture. Yi Xian shook his head. It has nothing to do with me. All of them couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian when they heard Yi Xian. Yi Xian drew a large circle on the ground and said, We're at least 500 kilometers away from the imperial capital from this place, and we'll have to pass through at least 12 cities along the way. Right at this moment, the woman suddenly said, The imperial capital of the Tang Empire? Yi Xian stopped and replied with a question. Don't you dare. Everyone looked at each other. The woman in the linen shirt looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, We can't turn back now. The further we go, the more they'll be surprised. When he spoke up to this point, he paused slightly and said, To be honest, all of you are at the Nether Passage realm right now, so you have to spend a huge amount of money to improve your cultivations. I'm afraid what we seized just now wouldn't be of much use to all of you, right? Cultivation required money. This group of people became mercenaries to earn money and then buy cultivation resources to improve themselves. No matter how talented one was, without money, it would still be difficult to advance. After a moment of silence, everyone looked at Lu Banzwang. Lu Banzwang looked at Yi Xian. What's the plan? Yi Xian thought for a while and then said, I don't have a plan. Just grab it and run. Snatch and run. The cloth-robed woman nodded. All right. Soon everyone mounted the black wolves. Under the leadership of Yi Xian and Lu Banzwang, the group went straight to the depths of the Tang Empire. All of them were top geniuses. It could be said that as long as they did not encounter a Dharma realm powerhouse or an army, they were not afraid of anyone. Not long after, the group arrived at another ancient city. They didn't see what city it was and directly rushed into the city, then went straight to the city lord's mansion. Every city had a city lord's mansion. The city lord's mansion was the highest institution in the city. It could also be said that it was the richest place except for the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Naturally, Xian could not take these people to rob the Drunken Immortal restaurant. The city lord's mansion was their best target. The group rushed to the city lord's mansion at an extremely fast speed. Along the way they naturally encountered many soldiers, but these soldiers could not stop them. Xian and Lu Banzwang directly rushed into the city lord's mansion's treasure vault. Without any nonsense, the two frantically searched everything in the treasure vault. After a few breaths, the entire treasure vault was gone. After a quarter of an hour, Xian and the others rushed out of the city and headed to the next city. Not long after Xian and the others left, a group of black-robed cavalrymen suddenly rushed into the city. This group of black-robed cavalrymen had a total of 300 people. Each of them was equipped with a black long blade and exuded a sharp and cold aura. Black Blade Guards. The Imperial Palace of the Tang Empire. Each of them was at least at the peak of the High Sky Realm. They were all elite soldiers selected from the various military camps of the Tang Empire. The leader was a man wearing a mask. The masked man raised his head and looked into the distance. Chase. Soon this group of Black Blade Guards directly rushed out of the city. In a mountain range, Xian and the others were still running wildly. Not far from Xian, Lu Banzwang suddenly said, "There is a group of cavalrymen behind us, about 300 people. They are not ordinary cavalrymen. They are very strong." Xian nodded. "Can they catch up with us?" Lu Banzwang shook his head. "No." Xian said, "Then let's ignore them. Let's go to the next city." Speaking up to this point, he suddenly said loudly, "Just now we obtained at least 50 million gold coins, 3 supreme-grade spiritual artifacts, and other miscellaneous items." In the field, everyone suddenly laughed. Let's do it ruthlessly, ha. Charge. Let's rob. We're rich, ha." Lu Banzwang glanced at Xian. "You don't look like a swordsman but more like a bandit." Xian was speechless. Soon Xian and the others rode the Black Wolf to another ancient city. The city wall of this ancient city was already full of soldiers with longbows. Seeing this scene, the people behind Xian were about to rush, but Xian suddenly said, "Go, take a detour." "Take a detour?" Everyone was stunned. "Stop robbing?" Xian said in a deep voice. "Trust me, take a detour." After that he turned around and left on the Black Wolf. Lu Banzwang glanced at Xian. "Follow him." Very quickly the group of people turned around and left, disappearing from the group of soldiers. Seeing this scene, the face of a general on the city wall instantly became ferocious. Damn it! In less than a quarter of an hour, hundreds of cavalrymen came to the city. They were the Black Blade Guards. The masked man looked up at the city wall. On the city wall, the general said in a deep voice, "They are gone." At this time the masked man suddenly said, "Oh no, they're going to the next city. Let's go." As soon as the voice fell, hundreds of cavalrymen immediately turned around. On the other side, Xian and the others were still running between the mountains. The terrain of these mountains was very simple. Fortunately, the demon wolves under them were strong enough, and the complex terrain was not an obstacle for these demon wolves. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to go deep into the Tang Empire's hinterland. At this time, Lu Banzwang, who was next to Xian, suddenly said, "Are you afraid that they will delay us and then the cavalrymen behind us will catch up?" Xian nodded. "We only have 13 people, so we can only fight as soon as possible. Once we are surrounded, when their cavalrymen and army arrive, we won't be able to escape even if we have wings." Lu Banzwang glanced into the distance. "They should have a backup plan." Xian nodded slightly. "So we have to be faster." As he said this, he looked around. "Everyone, if you fight later, please do your best. Don't hold back." Everyone nodded. They also knew their current situation. At this time they definitely did not dare to be careless. Although they were all geniuses, they were now facing a country. Thinking about it, it was actually very exciting. They were robbing a country. When they went back, they would have something to brag about. Soon, a city appeared in everyone's line of sight. The city was much larger than the previous two cities. It was a big city. Everyone's expression gradually became solemn. A big city, the defense inside must be very strong. Lu Banzwang looked at Zhou Xian. Do we do it? Everyone also looked at Zhou Xian. After the previous few things, Zhou Xian actually had a little prestige in the hearts of everyone. It should be said that they had a good impression of him, especially when Zhou Xian did not take 50% of the loot alone, but shared it with everyone. He wasn't a greedy person. After all, no one liked someone who was insatiably greedy. Zhou Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "Do it. If we succeed this time, then all of us should be able to earn a lot." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward first. Yili suddenly said, "That fellow isn't bad. Big sister, you can ask him if he's willing to join us once it's over, and then we can explore the world together." The others behind Lu Banzwang nodded to display their agreement. Lu Banzwang glanced at Zhou Xian. "I'll ask him when the time comes. Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, their group charged forward. Zhou Xian and the others were very swift, extremely swift. They were much faster than ordinary horses. Especially when they charged forward, they were extremely swift. "Who goes there?" Someone roared furiously on the city wall. Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed. Bang! The city wall exploded into pieces, and then Zhou Xian and the others charged into the city. All of them charged straight towards the city governor's estate. However, it didn't take long for a large group of soldiers to obstruct their path. Zhou Xian's face remained emotionless. "Kill your way over." As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed with his finger, and then Spirit Sword flew forward. Hiss. The heads of numerous soldiers instantly flew into the air while Lu Banzwang and the others attacked successively. They were unstoppable. Zhou Xian's group of 13 instantly broke through the army's formation and charged straight towards the city governor's estate. Even though there were soldiers surrounding them all along the way, they weren't able to affect Zhou Xian's group at all. Zhou Xian and Lu Banzwang, who led the group, killed practically anyone they saw, and none of the people behind them were weak as well. Just like that, they charged into the city governor's estate once more. Meanwhile, numerous formidable auras suddenly assaulted them. Divine Fusion Realm experts. Moreover, there were 3 of them. Just as Zhou Xian was about to make a move, Lu Banzwang, who was beside him, suddenly dashed out. Her speed was extremely fast and her body tore through the air. Before Zhou Xian could see clearly, a Divine Combination Realm expert not far away was sent flying, and he never stood up again. Zhou Xian was slightly shocked in his heart. This woman isn't just an ordinary level of formidable. As for the other 2 Divine Fusion Realm experts, they didn't attack after witnessing this scene, and they turned around and left decisively. The 2 of them weren't stupid, and continuing to attack would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Lu Banzwang turned around to glance at Zhou Xian. The cultivators of Pine Prefecture aren't very powerful. When she spoke up to this point, she seemed to have thought of something and continued, "Amongst the cultivators I've seen, you and Xianxia are exceptions." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked swiftly towards the distance. "Xianxia." Zhou Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly followed after her. Very quickly, the 2 of them entered the treasury. They didn't even look carefully and directly plundered everything in a frenzy. A moment later, just as the 2 of them were about to walk out of the treasury, there was a sudden change. Without any warning, 2 cold lights directly slashed at Zhou Xian's and Lu Banzwang's throats. At the same time, 2 shadowy figures appeared out of nowhere behind them. Dark Realm Assassins. Chapter 129. Just as Zhou Xian and the other 5 charged towards the men in black, dozens of silver crossbow bolts suddenly shot towards them. These crossbow bolts were spirit weapons as well. How bold! Zhou Xian suddenly stopped and roared, "Get behind me." The 5 of them did not hesitate as they stood in a row and hid behind Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian stomped his right foot on the ground. Boom! In an instant the earth shook violently. In an instant the power of the earth gathered around his body. Armor of Mother Earth. Zhou Xian held the spirit elegant sword in his hand for a while, and waves of sword gleams shot out. Although these sword gleams blocked most of the crossbow bolts, there were still some crossbow bolts that pierced through his sword gleams and landed on his body. However, the armor of Mother Earth on his body blocked these crossbow bolts, but it was still very painful. Just as the men in black were about to fire a second round of crossbow bolts, Xian suddenly stomped his right foot and shot towards the group of men in black like an arrow released from a bow. Kill! Behind Xian, the 5 of them also charged out. Before Xian arrived, the spirit elegance sword in his hand flew out. This strike contained sword force, battle intent, and sword intent. Most importantly, there was also the power of the earth. The speed and power of this strike had completely exceeded the limits of the Nether Passage realm. The leading man in black was pierced through the abdomen by this strike. At this moment, a huge sword suddenly appeared in Xian's hand. The big black sword. With the big black sword in hand, Xian leaped up and arrived in front of one of the men in black. Then he slashed down with his sword. The power of this strike was too terrifying. It was as though this strike could split the earth, and its power was incomparably domineering. The eyes of the man in black suddenly constricted. He abandoned his crossbow and pulled out a black saber from his waist to slash at Xian's big black sword. Bam! The moment the two collided, the man in black's saber instantly shattered. At the same time, the man in black was smashed into pieces by Xian's strike. Shattering with a single strike. After obtaining the power of earth, his strength had increased by more than a little. It could be said that he could have easily killed a Nether Passage realm expert, but at this moment these Nether Passage realm experts were not ordinary Nether Passage realm experts. Moreover, in order to end the battle quickly, he did not dare to hold back and directly use the power of the earth. After killing the man in black, he swung his sword to the side. A powerful golden sword light surged out like a tidal wave. Boom! A black-robed man who was several zhang away was instantly sent flying. At the same time, the elegant spirit sword pierced through the forehead of a black-clothed man at almost the same time. Kill! Xian vanished on the spot once more. Rays of light flickered incessantly while more and more blood covered the ground. What was worth mentioning was that the 5 people following Xian were also extremely powerful. The 5 of them could fight against several people at once, and they were not at a disadvantage at all. Especially Ling Han, who wielded a long spear. The number of people he killed was second only to Xian. In the field, the group of black-clothed men became fewer and fewer. And behind Xian and the others, the battle situation was still fierce. 7 people against hundreds of black blade guards. Fortunately, it was in the dense forest and these black blade guards could not get into formation. Otherwise, Lu Banzwang and the others would not be able to block them at all. Even so, Lu Banzwang and the others were still in a terrible situation. Even the powerful Lu Banzwang had been injured at this moment. Time passed bit by bit and soon half an hour was up. On the other side, Xian held the large black sword in his hand and suddenly threw it forward. 10 zhang away. Ping. A black-clothed man was instantly smashed into pieces by this large black sword. With the death of this black-clothed man, all the black-clothed men in the field were dead. However, Xian and the others were all seriously injured. But fortunately no one died. Xian quickly put away the bows and arrows of the black-clothed men, turned around and ran not far away. Support them. The 5 people behind Xian hurriedly rushed over. Soon Xian and the others arrived at the battlefield where Lu Banzwang and the others were. Without any nonsense, Xian directly threw the large black sword in his hand toward a black blade guard not far away. Ping. The black blade guard was directly smashed into meat paste by this sword. Retreat. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from the group of black blade guards not far away. Soon the black blade guards retreated like the tide. Xian and the others did not give chase because their current situation was not very good. Soon the group of black blade guards retreated out of the dense forest and came to an open space. Next to the masked man, a black blade guard said in a low voice, "Commander, those people are all seriously injured. We have a chance to kill them." The masked man shook his head. "The space inside is narrow and not suitable for us to fight. Even if we can kill them in the end with the combat strength of those dozen people, I'm afraid we will all be wiped out." As he said this, he glanced at the dense forest. "If we go further in, we will reach this swamp. They can't advance at all. Let's surround this place and wait for reinforcements." Next to the masked man, a black blade guard said in a low voice, "Commander, these 13 people are all geniuses. Ordinary people are no match for them." The masked man sneered. "Don't worry, there are many people here who want Xian dead. Pass down my order. Everyone stay alert." Don't let them escape. Yes. The Black Blade Guards replied in unison. In the dense forest, Zhou Xian and the others sat in front of a pool. At this moment half of the pool had been dyed red. It was all their own blood. Almost everyone was injured in the previous battle. The one who suffered the most was a man called Xianxia. His entire right leg had been chopped off. Zhou Xian walked over to Xianxia and took out a golden sore pill. He was about to pass it to Xianxia, but Xianxia shook his head. Don't waste it. Zhou Xian forcefully stuffed the golden sore pill into Xiangxia's mouth. The latter looked at Zhou Xian and didn't say a word. Zhou Xian glanced at everyone. Although he couldn't see, he could feel that everyone was extremely tired at this moment. Because the previous battle had really consumed too much of their energy. Their injuries and exhaustion could be said to be very bad. The atmosphere was slightly heavy. Meanwhile, Zhou Xian suddenly smiled. Are all of you afraid? Everyone looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian shook his head and smiled. We have no way out. At worst we'll die. What do all of you think? Everyone laughed when they heard this. That's right. At worst we'll die. Anyway, there's no worse ending than this. Zhou Xian said solemnly. According to my speculation, those people outside are waiting for reinforcements. There must be reinforcements, but I don't know what kind of reinforcements they are. Just now our people went to the front to take a look. Not far ahead is a boundless swamp. It's even more unrealistic for us to pass through this swamp. The only thing we can do now is to kill our way out of the encirclement. Of course, it's very difficult because those hundreds of people are well-trained elites. Moreover, we're seriously injured. However, we have no other choice. Everyone fell silent. Zhou Xian looked at Lu Banzwang. Do you have any other ideas? Lu Banzwang shook his head. We can't kill our way out. Those people are all men of sacrifice. They won't retreat at all. At this moment all of us are seriously injured. If we force our way out except for one or two of us, the rest will die. As she spoke, she glanced at Zhou Xian. Do you understand what I mean? Zhou Xian fell silent. He naturally understood Lu Banzwang's meaning, but he neglected one point. He still had battle power, so did Lu Banzwang. Both of them were top-notch, so it wouldn't be too difficult for them to rush out. But what about Ling Han and the others? Although Ling Han and the others were also strong, after the bloody battle just now, they only had about 50 to 60% of their strength left. If they rushed out now, those soldiers were not afraid of death. Not to mention Ling Han and the others, even he and Lu Banzwang would be in danger. However, if they didn't rush out when the Tang Empire's reinforcements arrived, everyone would still die. The situation was very bad. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared not far away. Lu Banzwang subconsciously wanted to attack, but was stopped by Zhou Xian. Because he was very familiar with the clothes worn by the black-robed old man in front of him. It was the clothes of the drunken immortal building. The old man quickly walked in front of Zhou Xian and bowed slightly. Young Master Yi. Zhou Xian said, N. The old man said in a low voice. This old man received the 5th floor master's order to come and help young Master Yi. 5th floor master. Zhou Xian was stunned. Soon he remembered. The 9th floor master of the drunken immortal building had been promoted to the 5th floor master. Zhou Xian said in a low voice, How do we help? The old man said, 300 miles away from here, there is a city called Guinan City. Young Master Yi and the others must go to the drunken immortal building because the Tang Empire's army is surrounding you from all directions. You can't escape from other places. Zhou Xian said, Continue. The old man glanced outside the bamboo forest and said, Later the people of the drunken immortal building will take action. At that time young Master Yi and the others will rush out of the chaos and go straight to Guinan City. We have people inside to receive you. Zhou Xian nodded. That's good. The old man glanced at Zhou Xian and the others. Everyone, can we start now? Zhou Xian looked at Lu Banzwang. Lu Banzwang was silent for a moment, then nodded. Let's go. With that she looked at Xianxia, who had a broken leg. Xianxia grinned. You guys go. I won't be able to leave. Lu Banzwang looked at Yili beside him. You'll be responsible for taking care of him later. Yili nodded. Understood. Lu Banzwang looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian looked at the old man. The old man nodded. At this moment the sound of fighting suddenly came from outside the forest. It was very intense. Zhou Xian said, Let's go. Everyone jumped onto the black wolves. In the next moment, the 13 of them rushed out of the forest. When they rushed out of the forest, there were dozens of black-robed people fighting with the Black Blade Guards. Among them, there were actually 20 Divine Combination Realm experts. Xian rode in the front. The exquisite sword constantly shuttled in front of him. Every time it shuttled, it would bring along a stream of blood. At this moment, the masked man not far away suddenly shouted angrily, "Stop them!" Soon most of the Black Blade Guards surrounded Xian and the rest. However, they were quickly stopped by the Divine Combination Realm experts from the Drunken Immortal Inn. Xian and the rest rushed out of the encirclement of the Black Blade Guards. However, very soon Xian and the rest's expressions suddenly turned grave. A man holding a crescent moon blade stood about 300 meters in front of Xian and the rest. The man looked rather young and was only in his 20s. His long hair was draped over his chest and he had a sinister smile on his face. Behind the man there were another 20 people. All of them were holding long blades and wearing iron armor. At this moment the man suddenly shouted angrily, "Kill!" With that he directly rushed towards Xian and the rest. His long blade dragged on the ground, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Then the ground cracked inch by inch. His aura was also rising crazily. Divine Combination Realm. Chapter 130. Saber Path Master. Xian and the others' expressions immediately turned grave. It was not that they were afraid, but this time a Saber Path Master had actually come and he was so young. Obviously this was no longer just the Tang Empire targeting them. Behind this, there must be the Kuraki Academy, the Dark World, and even the Great Cloud Empire in the Great Cloud Realm. The man with the long saber and the others were extremely fast and their momentum was like a rainbow. Although there were only about 20 people, they had the momentum of a magnificent army. Before the man with the long saber and the others arrived, their momentum had already struck first. And it was this momentum that actually forced the Black Wolf under Xian and the others to stop. At this moment, Lu Banzhuang suddenly looked at Xian. "Do you want to hit him or should I?" Xian thought for a moment, then made a gesture of invitation. "Please." Lu Banzhuang nodded. "I'll leave the remaining 20 people to you. The rest of the brothers retreat first. Don't talk nonsense, leave immediately." As soon as she finished speaking, her entire body directly floated out. Her speed was so fast that there was actually an afterimage behind her. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Banzhuang tapped his foot in the air. It was like a dragonfly touching the surface of the water lightly. However, it was precisely this tap that forcefully broke the saber momentum of the man with the long saber. The pupils of the man with the long saber constricted slightly. In the next moment he held his saber and suddenly swung upwards. Swoosh! The air was directly torn apart. Lu Banzhuang still tapped his foot. Bam! The man with the long saber instantly retreated several feet away. As soon as he stopped, the ground under his feet instantly cracked. The man with the long saber stared at Lu Banzhuang. "You're not on the martial roll." Lu Banzhuang slowly walked towards the man with the long saber. "Martial roll? I only recognize the monster ranking." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body directly floated out. Not far away beside Xian, Yili suddenly said, "Big Sis is on the monster ranking." Monster ranking. Xian nodded slightly and did not think too much about it. After seeing that Lu Banzhuang could contend against the man with the long saber, he said, "You guys leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, the spirit elegant sword at his waist directly flew out. Not far away, an armored man wielding a saber fiercely slashed at Xian's spirit elegant sword. Swish! The spirit elegant sword directly shattered the armored man's long saber, then directly penetrated and pierced the armored man's armor. However, that armor actually forcefully blocked the spirit elegant sword. However, the armored man was also shaken by Xian's sword and was forced to continuously retreat. And at this moment, a hand suddenly grasped the spirit elegant sword. In the next moment, the spirit elegant sword slashed horizontally and pierced through the armored man's neck. Swish! A bloody head flew out in an instant. In the distance, the moment Xian charged out, Yili and the others directly rode their black wolves and charged into the distance. Go! They had never disobeyed Lu Banzhuang's orders. At this moment it was not the time to talk about loyalty. At this moment, to Yi Xian and Lu Banzwang, the fewer people there were, the easier it would be for them to leave. After Yi Li and the others left, Yi Xian was instantly surrounded by 19 armored men. And at this moment he could no longer achieve an instant kill, because those 19 armored men attacked and defended at the same time. Right now he had absolutely no chance to kill them. Not only did he not have a chance to kill them, but he even showed signs of being suppressed. And on the other side, Lu Banzwang was suppressing the man wielding the long saber. Yi Xian was very shocked. That man wielding the long saber was a saber Dao master, but Lu Banzwang was actually suppressing him. Really not simple. At this moment, Lu Banzwang, who was not far away, suddenly said, "Retreat." As her voice fell, she suddenly slammed her palm on the ground. Boom. The ground around her and the man wielding the long saber was directly lifted up. After a moment of silence, a figure suddenly flew out. This figure was that man wielding the long saber. The man wielding the long saber flew more than 100 feet away. On the other hand, Lu Banzwang suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. In the next moment, the armored men on both sides of Yi Xian were directly blasted away. Immediately after, Lu Banzwang carried Yi Xian and dashed forward. Swish. With this charge, he actually managed to cover a distance of 500 feet in an instant. And when the man wielding the long saber and the others were about to continue chasing, Lu Banzwang and Yi Xian had already appeared more than 300 feet away, and they had completely widened the distance between them. However, when they were about to continue chasing, a voice suddenly rang out by their ears. "Don't chase after her. That woman is on the genius ranking of the Central Divine Prefecture." The monster ranking. The man wielding the long saber narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard this. Qingzhou had the martial ranking, but the Divine Central Continent had the monster ranking. The value of the monster ranking wasn't something the martial ranking could compare to. After all, the monster ranking was the goal of all the geniuses in the firmament world. Only the most monstrous geniuses in the firmament world were able to enter the ranking. The man wielding the long saber said in a low voice, "What does the higher-ups intend to do?" After a moment of silence, the voice resounded once more. "Await orders. The higher-ups have already sent someone over." The man nodded and said fiercely, "So what if it's the monster ranking? Xiahou Dao will definitely kill them." Xiahou Dao, the sixth on the Qingzhou martial ranking. Along with the departure of Yi Xian and the others, the experts of the Drunken Immortal retreated successively. However, this wasn't the end of the matter. At a certain place, Lu Banzwang suddenly stopped carrying Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was pale and his breathing was chaotic. He seemed as if he was seriously ill. His speed was too swift. Lu Banzwang's speed was too fast, so fast that it was abnormal. It could be said that if he hadn't cultivated to the golden body realm, he would probably have been torn to shreds. Lu Banzwang glanced at Yi Xian. "Not only do you cultivate martial arts and swordsmanship, but your physical body is also amazing. Are you interested in exploring the Divine Central Continent?" Yi Xian patted his slightly stuffy chest, then nodded. "I'll go." Lu Banzwang nodded, then whistled. Soon 2 black wolves ran over from afar. The 2 of them leaped onto the black wolves and disappeared not far away in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian and Lu Banzwang ran wildly on the black wolves. The 2 of them were extremely fast, and in less than an hour they caught up with Yi Li and the others. When they saw that Yi Xian and Lu Banzwang were fine, Yi Li and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Soon they arrived at Guinan City. This time there were no soldiers on the city walls. Not only that, but when they arrived at the foot of the city walls, the city gates suddenly opened and a person came out to greet them. The old man walked quickly to Yi Xian and bowed slightly. "Young master, you please follow me." Under the old man's lead, the group entered the city. When they entered the city, more than a dozen black-robed people immediately appeared around them. 8 of them were in the Divine Combination realm, and these people were the powerhouses of the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Just like that, under the escort of the powerhouses of the Drunken Immortal restaurant, Yi Xian arrived at the Drunken Immortal restaurant, and the dozen black-robed people guarded the surroundings vigilantly. Yi Xian. After knowing that Yi Xian had appeared in the Tang Kingdom, the 5th floor master of the Jiang Kingdom immediately notified the Drunken Immortal restaurant of the Tang Kingdom to protect Yi Xian with all their strength. Not only that, even the 3rd floor master of the Qingzhou side sent a message to help as much as possible. Although Yi Xian had become mortal enemies with the Kuraki Academy and the Dark World, the Drunken Immortal Restaurant did not care about this. To the Drunken Immortal Restaurant, they had already established a relationship with Yi Xian and his master. At this time they naturally had to do their best to rope Yi Xian in. There were two sides to everything. The Drunken Immortal Restaurant would offend the Kuraki Academy and the Dark World because of this, but they would also gain the friendship of Yi Xian and his master. Inside the room, everyone sat around a large table. And the Drunken Immortal Restaurant had already prepared a meal. Not only was there food, there was also a medical grandmaster treating everyone's injuries. This treatment could not be any better. Everyone was obviously very hungry, and they began to devour the food on the table in a frenzy. Not far away, the elder of the Drunken Immortal Restaurant was standing quietly. Yi Xian faced the elder and the elder hurriedly bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi, do you have any instructions?" Yi Xian said, "How should I address you?" The elder hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, you can just call me Steward Wu." "Oh, that's right, our 8th floor master has already gone to investigate and will return in a while." Yi Xian nodded. "Many thanks." The elder bowed slightly. He glanced at Yi Xian and the others and then quietly retreated. Not far away, Ling Han suddenly asked, "Are you very familiar with the Drunken Immortal Restaurant?" Yi Xian nodded. "Very familiar." Ling Han nodded. This Drunken Immortal Restaurant is also very famous in the Divine Central Continent, and is not the slightest bit inferior to Kuraki Academy or Azure Billow Academy. They actually treat you like this, so you're not simple. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You guys are not simple either, are you?" Ling Han chuckled and did not speak. The people here were actually not simple. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Previously we seized a batch of top-grade spirit weapon crossbows. I want to keep these top-grade spirit weapon crossbows and I'll split the gold coins with you." Beside him Lu Banzwang suddenly shook his head. "You keep them, no need to split them." Yi Xian faced Lu Banzwang and Lu Banzwang said calmly, "I want to make friends with you, don't refuse." Beside him Yili nibbled on a chicken drumstick and then nodded. "Big Sis is right. You can have that batch of top-grade spirit weapons. Just treat it as us making friends with you." Ling Han nodded. "Brother Yi is a straightforward person and also a loyal person. We'll make friends with you." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Lu Banzwang looked at him and said, "Just take it. It's a gesture of goodwill from everyone, so don't be fussy. In the future we won't go easy on you." Yi Xian thought about it and then nodded. "Thank you, brothers." At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly walked in. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and the others, and then he cupped his fists and said, "Everyone, I'm the 8th master of the Drunken Immortal Tower from the Tang Kingdom." Everyone also stood up to return the salute. Because this 8th master was in the 10,000 Dharma tier. The 8th master walked in front of Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "Little friend Yi, the situation is not looking good." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" The 8th master glanced at everyone and said, "According to the news I've received, the Kuraki Academy and the Dark Realm have offered a sky-high price in Qingzhou to kill you. So far, there are already 3 people on the martial roll who are rushing over here, and it's even possible that the person ranked first will also come, because the Drunken Immortal Tower and the Dark Realm have offered a heaven-level mid-level martial arts technique and a heaven-level mid-level cultivation technique. Apart from that, there's also a bright-level high-grade spirit weapon." Speaking up to this point, he paused slightly and then continued, "That's not all. According to the Drunken Immortal Tower's information, they've used some unknown means to convince King Kaoshan of the Great Cloud Empire. Now the Great Cloud Empire has also made their move. The black-clothed crossbow team you encountered earlier was sent by the Great Cloud Empire. Now they may directly exert pressure on the Jiang country, or even directly send experts here. Or perhaps they're already on their way here." Yi Xian and the others fell silent. The 8th master continued, "Also there's news from the Divine Central Continent. The Kuraki Academy and the Dark Realm have already transferred people from the Divine Central Continent here." As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian and the others. This time they're serious and they're going to do it at all costs. At this moment, Lu Banzwang suddenly drank a mouthful of water, and then smashed the bowl heavily on the table. "Call for reinforcements." Next to him, Ling Han hesitated and then said, "Sister, Do we also have to call for reinforcements on the monster list? Lu Banzwang said indifferently, yes. The Eighth Master. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.